gracious Heavenly Father, we are very grateful, Father, for the opportunity we have to spend time with you. We're grateful for the residents. Help us to be civil in our discussions and to be open to other points of view. Be with us at this time, we pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We want to recognize that we don't have our city administrator here tonight. You'll probably see a name, Erin Wells. You see it right there. She is down at a conference down in St. George, so she'll be on remotely if there's any comments that she'll be making tonight. We want to just welcome everyone out. At this time in our agenda, we have set a time for unscheduled public appearances. So if there's anyone here who would like to come and discuss with the council anything that's not on the agenda that's a public hearing, other than the one with the Mountain Ridge Park, if they'd like to come up and discuss things with the council at this time, we'd like to open up our public unscheduled public appearances and invite you to come up. If you'll please state your name and keep your comments to 3 minutes. So our unscheduled public comments are now open.
Hi, my name's Nathan Palmer. I live in the Canterbury area here at Highland, Utah. And there is currently underway a development of a subdivision called Millhaven that's just north of the Canterbury North neighborhood and just adjacent to the Avery Avenue intersection there. My concern is currently there's a trail that's being planned to use, city resources towards the development of this trail and the maintenance of this trail. Currently, I walked around 2 streets and found 245 cracks and problems with the sidewalk. That's even a couple places where there's 4-inch raising of the sidewalk that's occurred. And then there's potholes that I'm seeing everywhere. I don't necessarily feel that it's the best use of our city's resources to spend on additional trails when it's only cutting off one additional house. And it's a parallel path to the roads that already exist. And there's plenty of trails that already end in neighborhoods. In addition, for the people that live in the Avery Avenue neighborhood, they are going to have to stop 4 times in the space of 500 feet or less just to leave the neighborhood. And that just seems like, one, a safety concern, especially with having an intersection into the Murdoch Canal Trail for bikers. I know when you're going on a straightaway as a cyclist, a road biker, that it's a safety concern when you have pedestrians walking onto the biking side of the Murdoch Canal Trail, especially in the middle of it, when it's not only 2 houses down, when you're going to have another intersection to the main road where everything all conjoins. So I know that the city council is considering the plan with regards to the city trails, and that should be coming up and coming here in the next year or so. I just ask that as we are considering our resources and considering our time and considering public and safety features, that we consider whether or not this is really the best use of our time at this juncture. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Hi, I'm Amy Rogers, and this is my daughter, Kaylee. We are here to give a comment about the Mountain Ridge Park, if that's all right. We don't have a lot of time. So I'm actually just recently found out that there are plans to be made for a ninja park going in that park. I was actually not aware of that, but I wanted to come today specifically to talk about the disturbance from the park that is already there. And And I'm really proud of Kaylee. The moment I told her today that there was a meeting about the Mountain Ridge Park and talking about the problems that have occurred, she asked if she could come. This was her doing. So I want to let her speak first, and then I'll say a few more things, if that's okay.
Hi. I just wanted to make a
If you'll
comment.
just state your name for the record, please.
Oh, I'm Kaylee Rogers. I just wanted to make a comment about the noise at the park. So my bedroom, my window is like backed up to the park, so I can hear all the noise from it. And usually I don't fall asleep till like 12 or 1 because of all the noise from the teenagers and the adults playing tennis and everything. And so I've been super sleep deprived, and I just think that we need to control it better, you know, do things to reduce the sound instead of increase it. And I think that the Ninja Park would definitely not help that. So, yeah.
And then I also want to mention that the consistency of the disturbance, even with the police showing up, we do call the police at night. It's kind of appalling. I see and hear things that you may not see and hear, with it being very close to my house. I have 5 young kids who need to go to school in the morning, and multiple times they have woken me up, "Mom, I can't sleep." And it occurs nearly every night. And even though the police are called several times, it has not stopped. I'm not sure a curfew will help, to be honest. That's a step in the right direction. But I think the Ninja Park, from my understanding of where it's going to be located, is going to be a little bit more secluded than the park, which I think will attract more teenagers and possibly more destruction that has already been done on the current park that's there. So that's really all I have to say. It's been a huge disturbance. It's affected my kids' sleep, and I hope that something can be done sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Tyson England. I've been in Highland for about 8 years over on 6000 West and 10050 North. So what I wanted to ask for today or talk about today is we're interested, we have a near acre size lot. In the back half, we are interested in looking into subdividing. This will benefit the city in many ways. First of all, it would put a sidewalk right along that stretch of land or right along that property. And right now it's not super safe. People tend to go out onto the road because of weeds and stickers and stuff. And there's a lot of foot traffic for people getting over to the Murdoch Trail. It would also beautify the place with a new home there and then add tax revenue to the city. And so what I wanted to talk about today is the neighborhood we're in. It's called Mountain View Acres, and it is zoned as an R140. And I understand that nearly 25% of the neighborhood has not met its density requirement. I don't speak your technical language, but there's still lots that can be subdivided or as minimum as a half acre in that neighborhood. So it would not require a rezone. It would still remain an R140 zone. It does meet the minimum requirement of 120 feet of frontage along 6000 West. And but the requirement is that each side would need to be 20,000 square feet. We're currently at 39,400, which means we're just short of it by 600 feet. As we looked at the map, you can flip over to the back. To get that kind of square footage, we're talking about just literally a couple of feet more on the east side of that property. And that happens to be the city's property right there along the road. It's actually from this, it might not look like it, but from the property line to the road is like 20 to 25 feet. It's a fairly substantial chunk of land. We don't need all of that for sure, but I wanted to come today to seek the council's advice or approval on us obtaining and purchasing somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to something 100 square feet of that property on that side of the property, on that side of the lot. I don't know what.
Traditionally, what we, during the public comment, we have you give kind of comments. If any of the council would like to chime in on it, it's up to them, but it's more for you to share your input to the council. Does that make sense?
Oh, I see. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
is there any council members? Tyson, to kind of maybe help you, what Tyson's talking about, his home's on 6,000 West. In this subdivision he lives in is an R140 subdivision. If we look at our code, you can have 25% of those lots be a half acre. Yeah, a half acre, 20,000. In his subdivision, they have not used up all of the lots or the 25% is what he's talking about.
Right.
However, what Tyson's advocating is he needs 600 feet to purchase from the city. And I think that's, and we've been communicating, I know he's talked with Rob Patterson on it. And I think some of the question is where the city utilities are along 6,000 West and how his request. And I think that's kind of where we're at this time, is trying to understand where those utilities are at and how that would affect if we sold any property.
Yeah.
Is that kind of
That's
help?
right.
I
Yes.
think that's kind of been our conversation we've been having a little bit.
That's right. Exactly right. So, yeah, any other questions or thoughts on that? Okay.
So is
Thank
this
you.
something then that we'd expect to see on
Yeah,
a future agenda?
he hasn't made an application. But
Okay.
it's something that, Andy, I think we'd be okay if you wanted to just look to give some guidance a little bit where utilities, if it's something, and then it'd be up to the council. This would be, you'd have to surplus property, you'd have to see it's for the benefit of the public. There's a whole other, it's not a short process, I'm sorry. Tyson.
Sure,
It's a
yeah.
long process. So,
So I have one question, Mayor. So you said you'd be communicating with him as well as with Rob, is that right? So has this gone to the development committee that we have?
No.
Okay. Isn't that the first step?
well, he was just emailing, and I think he met with Rob, then Rob mentioned maybe to reach out to me. So it's just kind of been emails or phone calls. And now I think the question to be, it has to go to Andy to even see if this request would be something that even we have utilities there, where he's asking. So.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Just
Thank
a
you.
point of clarification, the requirement for R140 is 130 feet, not 120
Oh, thank
on
you.
the frontage.
I think it still would meet.
Yeah, I think
so thank you.
his lot's deep.
Great. Thank you.
Just so everyone's aware, any documents that are being presented to council will become part of the public notice, or the public can also access.
So I usually talk way too long, so I've timed myself, and so I'm under 3 minutes.
Yeah, well, if you'll make sure,
My name
you
is-
just state your name and everything. And
So my name is David Josie. First, I want to thank you all for your time because I've been to hundreds of city council meetings across Utah County in the last 25 years, and I appreciate the time that you guys put in and how hard it is to deal with a lot of people and trying to make them all happy because it's impossible. I've learned that doing what I'm going to talk to you about. So I represent North Utah County Soccer. Most people call us Nukes. We are a service organization that has been in the community for over 35 years. About 24 years ago, the organization needed some help, and somehow I was the lucky sucker. I no longer have kids that play, but I do have 2 grandkids in the program. Basically, 3 of us senior citizens run the program. We all have full-time jobs. Roger is a software engineer, Elisa works for the LDS Church, and I'm the director of QA at an international nonprofit software organization. Interestingly, we exist because Highland City residents over 30 years ago wanted their kids to be able to play soccer. We actually started in Highland. Up until we started doing online registration 10 to 12 years ago, all our registrations, coaches' meetings, almost all club functions were held at the old Highland City building. Highland is the base of our club. Multiple Highland City administrations have come to us asking us to run an organization for Highland kids to play soccer. I have even been tasked for many years to handle the signing and organization of your fields. We were the de facto Highland Recreation Department. As administrations have changed, our roles have changed. Evidently, last year, while I was, as the oldest child, assisting my father, who had dementia and leukemia, live his final months and then pass away, another organization who had been lobbying and petitioning for years to have exclusive access to Lone Peak Park is evidently granted that access. Somehow, although I for years had always been asked to provide help and advice, etc. for the city, I was not invited to the party. Evidently, an email was sent to me for a proposal, although I have never seen it. I personally don't care, but I'm a big boy, and it doesn't bother me that we weren't invited. But if you look at the documents that I sent, we have a lot of, probably more kids play soccer, not just for the sport of soccer, but in our club than by far any other club in the city and North Utah County. But that's just the document that I gave you is from, it's not that I made up, it's not that I found. I contacted our parent organization who runs soccer in the state of Utah, and that's the numbers they gave me. I do not know the details of the deal that was made. All I know is that I have been told that Surf will have exclusive use of the largest park in Highland. If you look at the numbers on the handout, they operate as a business, not as a service organization. Hundreds of other kids in multiple other sports are also being kicked out. I feel it is important for you to know the numbers that are on the handout. I was going to time myself and I forgot, so I'm going to stop because I don't know what the time was. So, oh, thank you.
That's your stop.
That was pretty good. I'm impressed with myself. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Is there anyone else that come up before the council?
Brent Pugh, I think you spoke with my wife and neighbors about this whole trail system, so I just want to come and say my piece. I sent a letter to the city council earlier today that kind of expressed my opinion, but to me it kind of seems like we're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. You probably don't have a map available, but you know, my wife's a runner, I'm a biker, we have dogs, a dog. We walk the trails, so we feel like we're really, you know, have a lot of experience with the trails. And so my opinion is of course, we agree that we want to connect the trails some way from, you know, the middle of Highland City to the Murdoch Canal Trail. It just seems like there were such better ways to do it that made such better sense. And so we've got this trail coming from the east side. And again, I don't have a map available, but coming across that comes to the new Mill Haven neighborhood. And if you just cross the street, you're right along the edge of that whole property that goes all the way along. And then we have a trail that goes from the Murdoch Canal to the Mill Haven property. And so it's like, why didn't we just like connect those two trails? So that just seems so logical to me. And instead we're doing this kind of, you know, wandering trail that goes through this very nice neighborhood through the middle of it. And so of course the trail will be disruptive too. As you've seen these houses they've got windows that are fairly close to the trail, like really close, like 3 giant steps and you're at their windows. And so with those houses that are along, you know, our section of it, but through the new development, like these lots are like extremely expensive, humongous. The houses that are going to go on those are going to be like incredible. And I don't know how many of those buyers know that there's going to be this public trail system that now kind of cuts through their neighborhood. So they think they're buying this kind of secluded neighborhood, which it should be, but they're going to have this trail system that goes through the middle of it. And so it just seemed like there was such a logical connection of the trail through the edges. And there was already a trail going there. And so we've lived in Highland for 20 years. You know, people talk about these trails that dead end to nowhere. And that's a trail that's going to dead end to nowhere now. So, you know, it's the Hunt's house that now they've kind of grassed over their little section of it. But it goes past, you know, these 3 other houses getting all the way to Mill Haven and then dead ends. So I wish there was a way we could still use that section. If not, do we have to cut through this new Mill Haven neighborhood? Can we just use that little section of existing roads and not disrupt neighborhoods? So I always feel like, again, I use the trails. The Murdoch Canal Trail is the gem, right? That's awesome because it's big, it's open. The little trails, you feel kind of creepy. Like when I'm walking between people's houses, I'm trying to go like this with blinders because I'm hoping I don't see anyone, and then just quit using them, right? You just go to the Murdoch Canal. So anyway, I'm not a fan of building more small trails. I say let's find a different way to do this.
Thank you.
So thanks, guys.
Is there anyone else who'd like to come up and address the council at this time? Okay, seeing none, we'll now close the public comments portion of our meeting. Council, as we get ready to go to consent, I'd like to move our item number 3G and 3H. So 3G is the trail maintenance contract awards, and 3H is action 2024 street preservation contract award. I'd like to move them up into our consent items. Is there anyone that would be opposed to move those up to consent?
I had some questions about H.
About H? Okay. Are you okay if we move G up to that? Okay. So on our consent, now we're going to move to our consent items. We have number 2A, which is approval of the meeting minutes from March 12th, 2024, and March 19th, 2024. And we're also moving up number 3G, Action Trail Maintenance Contract Award. Is there a motion?
I move that the City Council approve consent items 2A, the approval of meeting minutes from March 12th, 2024, and March 19th, 2024, and 3G, the 2024 Trail Maintenance Project Award.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Ron, second by Kim. Is there any further discussion need to be had? If there's not, let's go ahead and we'll go to vote.
You'll have to do.
Okay,
System broke
we'll start over here with you, Ron.
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Brittany?
Yes.
Okay, those two consent items are passed 5-0. We'll now move on to our first action item, which is action item number 3A. This will be a public hearing as a plat amendment to the Peck Hollow Plat B Lot 2. That will be Rob Patterson, who is our city attorney / planner.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. We have 3 plat amendments today. This is the first one. This is a property located down off of 9600 North. You can see it in there. I tried to highlight it. The blue is the existing Lot 2. The red are 2 other parcels or areas adjacent to it that are owned by the same property owner. If you see that kind of blue line hashed out, that will be the future boundary of the little parcel that has a home built onto it. So this is a request from the Pearsons. They own the property at issue, and they want to just combine the properties to avoid having lot lines where they want to expand their side yard. And if on the next slide, you'll see the proposed, the lettering got all messed up, but there's the proposed amended plat. You can see it encompasses part of that parcel where the home is currently located and that side parcel, making the whole lot a little over 3 acres. The other parcel remains at over ½ an acre, which is consistent with R120. Those are the standards for approving a plat amendment under state and city code. We don't see any reason why this shouldn't be approved as staff. So our recommendation is to approve it as presented. Any questions regarding this matter?
We actually had, I think, 1 or 2 emails that came from some individuals that were concerned about.
We had 1 objection, so I did send out the notices as required. This is actually why this is a public hearing. A resident from American Fork objected to this, making comment regarding wanting to keep this place more of an open space feel. In my opinion, this will remain that. It's staying as a single family lot, just will be used for additional accessory uses and landscaping is my understanding. So,
or a soccer field.
Or a soccer field. So I didn't see any additional concerns arising out of that objection.
Because this is a lot combination. This is not adding and splitting a lot, right?
This is not splitting a lot. It's combining parcels into one larger parcel.
I was worried. I thought maybe that was a miscommunication. I think they thought maybe we were splitting to make those smaller lots. Well, this is combining it, making it larger.
I've actually done that, and it needs to be done when it needs to be done. I mean, it's simpler, it simplifies it, but process-wise, will there be a quitclaim deed done and then reissuing, or how is it done?
No, there's an actual plat that will get recorded with the county that'll change what was the original lot to encompass all of this. That was the, if you go back a couple slides.
Yeah,
that is a, one down. That is a subdivision plat, so that'll record all the property interests involved. So you do need to hold a public hearing regarding this.
Okay.
But
if there's no further comments, I'm going to open it up for the public hearing.
I've got one quick question.
Okay,
but
go
we
ahead.
can do the public hearing.
Okay, let's go ahead. At this time, we're going to open the public hearing on our action item number 3A, which is the Peck Hollow Plat B Lot 2. Does anyone like to come address the council at this time on that item? Seeing none, we now close the public hearing and bring it back to council. And Doug, you have a question.
Yeah, Rob, it seems like there was something in the agenda packet about this, and I'm just not remembering it now and not pulling it up. Is there a technical reason why it needs to end up with the horseshoe instead of splitting the one and?
It's just the owner's preference.
It's just their okay.
Both of the lots, as amended, will still meet frontage requirements. They chose, rather than to incorporate that kind of side horseshoe into the middle kind of lot there, they decided to keep it separate, probably for a separate driveway access.
Okay, yeah, just curious.
Mayor, I'll make a motion.
Okay.
So I move that the Highland City Council accept the findings from the staff and approve the plat amendment to Peck Hollow Plat B, Lot 2.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Scott, second by Ron. Further discussion on this item? If not, we'll start with you, Kim, on the vote.
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Brittany? Yes. Ron?
Yes.
That passes 5-0. We'll now move on to action item number 3B, which is another plat amendment. This is the Young Sunrise Farm Plat A, Lot 301 and Lot 304.
103 and 104.
103 and 104, and this is what a lot of us would call the backside of the Longhorn field.
Correct. This is off the back of the Longhorn property. This was a subdivision that was approved in 2021. It's actually still being completed currently. One of the lot owners has purchased two lots, 103 and 104, shown on the plat there, and wishes to combine it, remove the line in the middle, and just make it one larger lot. You can see on there, there's the plat showing the amended lot, making it a larger lot, about 1.5 acres in size. Again, same standards apply to this. The only potential, not issue, but thing of note, both for this one and for the next one, is the subdivision could not have been originally platted this way because it has too few of lots for the number of smaller lots involved in the plat. There are 10 lots, which allows up to 2 smaller lots. And by combining the 2 larger lots, you're left underneath it. However, this is overall reducing density in the subdivision, and the council has in the past historically allowed similar lot combinations because it does reduce the density and, in fact, lessens the impact on adjacent property owners. This one, we mailed notices out and received no comments back at all, so no public hearing is required. We have one proposed stipulation on this. Because this was platted as 2 separate lots, they actually went in and when they developed it, they put in utility lines and then stubbed out laterals to each of the lots. With the combination, we don't like having 2 sets of utility connections for one lot, so we'd ask that they would go back to the road that they just laid, cut out one of them, and then just leave one connection for the overall lot.
So I have a question on that. Why would we require for them to go take out that utility? Because they could apply, because they would conform. If they apply to split that lot back, they would conform still.
Correct, they would.
Yeah, but we don't allow 2 water meters for one lot.
Okay. Oh, you're worried about the connection. Okay.
Yeah, it's what tends to happen to us is, number one, it gets a little confusing as to, like, if you shut off the water to the house, is the water really shut off if you have 2 water meters? Number 2, often what happens more likely is the second water meter kind of gets forgotten, and years later you have a water leak spring up, and who knows where the water's coming from, et cetera. You chase down. It's kind of a difficult thing to find. So what we do is when you combine a lot, if you're going to combine a lot and build one big home on the lot, wonderful, but just go out the street and terminate the water lines so that we have one water service, one PI service to the lot.
Sorry, council member.
Well, I just wondered, the applicants understand this and they're agreeable to it?
Yes, that was exactly what I was going to say. I communicated this stipulation to them. They understood it and were amenable to it.
Okay. Is this one that already has a home that's currently being built on it?
No. Adjacent to it, there is, on the furthest west lot, there is a home. These 2 are currently vacant.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and make a motion if we're ready. I move that City Council accept the findings and approve the plat amendment to Sunrise Farms Plat A including the proposed stipulation that the combined lot cannot have two sets of utility laterals.
Okay, I have a motion by Kim, second by Doug. Okay, we're going to start with, is there any other questions or comments on this before we do the vote? Seeing none, Doug, we're going to start with you.
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Brittany?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
That passes 5-0. We're now moving on to action item number 3C, which is a plat amendment of Millhaven Homes, Foxwood Estate. This is lots 17 through 19.
Correct. Thank you, Mayor, and again, Council. This is similar to the previous one. It is a lot combination, but it's not 2 becoming 1, it's 3 becoming 2. This is the Millhaven development that has been discussed by some of the residents. This was just approved by our new Development Administration Board last Thursday. It was approved as a 20-lot subdivision. However, Millhaven Homes already has a couple of property owners who wish to have larger lots on the south side of the property. So if you go to the next slide. So you can see on there, there's on the south side, there's lots 20, 19, 18, and 17. It's 19 through 17 are being readjusted, so you'll have 2 lots out of there that are larger. Lot 20 will be renamed to lot 19, but remains the same otherwise. And there you can see the future arrangement of those lots. Again, same standards apply as to the previous ones. We mailed notice. There was no objections. As with the previous one, again, this was approved as a 20-lot subdivision because under the city's code with the 25% rule for smaller lots, it had to be a 20-lot subdivision. But ultimately, this is, again, reducing density within the development. And in this one, it'd be much harder for those property owners to re-subdivide their lots than the previous one because they're merging 3 into 2 rather than just 2 into 1. Staff has no concerns with this, and again, we recommend approval. We have no stipulations recommended as part of this one, and the applicant is here. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention if the applicants were here for the previous 2, so if you were here and I missed you, I'm sorry.
So the applicant's here. Would the applicant like to come and address the council on anything? Mr. Train, is there anything like that? You don't have to. Don't feel like you have to come up. Okay, the question I have...
Todd Train, Millhaven.
So,
Did you get his name, Stephanie? Todd Trader.
Credibility here.
how are your kids doing at baseball?
They're doing great.
Todd, by the way, Todd, if you're wondering why Todd used to work for the city for many years, so this is not a friendly, when we're saying we're also great friends with the developers, we know Todd.
Todd, do you recognize what I'm holding up here?
Yep, that's Game Changer.
Strike out. My kids struck out. Yeah.
I currently am the freshman coach at Pleasant Grove High School. So.
Oh.
Missing a practice right now, so let's get this approved.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
So is there anything, Mr. Train, that you'd like to address the council on?
No, this is just, we wanted to do this now. I mean, we just got the 20-lot subdivision approved last week, but we wanted to do this now so I don't have to go out into the road and remove laterals. Okay. And so that's why we kind of went through this process now, understanding that we have approval on the 20-lot subdivision, but we have 2 owners that want bigger lots, and so we're combining the 3 into 2. And so I feel like this is good for Highland. It's just we wanted to do this now so we're not going through the process of an amendment later and cutting into road.
So what is are you doing this all as one phase? Is this going to be
Yep.
everything going in as one phase?
Yeah.
Is the trail, there was some residents are wondering about the trail, is that going to be coming in all at the same time?
Everything is going to be done by, I am hopeful, if we can get a pre-con soon. The work that's been happening out there, just so everyone knows, is the Lehigh irrigation line. That's what's been going in. No city infrastructure yet, but as soon as we get plat approved, the construction drawings approved, we're hopeful that we will have asphalt down by July, August at the latest. So we're moving very quickly.
How many of these lots? This is just a curiosity question. How many lots do you already have sold?
Right now, it looks like about half or more.
Interesting. We don't want to ask the price.
So, yeah.
Okay. So I have a question. So there was some consternation about the trail. Where is the trail in this? I've been trying to figure that out.
So if you go back one more, Rob. So we pick up the trail on 6400 West, about right there. Yep. It cuts across. It follows the roadway. Go down. Yep. Follows the roadway, and then it goes along that. We have dedicated more area to the city right there across the south side. The trail, there's already a trail corridor in Canterbury right there.
Yeah.
And so that's just a small connection. So
probably
that's-
the reason why you might see the council asking questions, this is the first subdivision that came through the new state legislative code, which the council did not approve, meaning this is not a subdivision that came in for approval from the city council. So this could be some of the first time the city council from our packet has seen this, because this
Right.
did not come before the council.
This is where the trail was during preliminary
Yeah,
plat.
it was.
And so we didn't change, we
So
didn't
to
change
help
it.
Scott, so Todd, my understanding is, so it comes, why did we not take the trail back behind the homes along the ravine or across the ravine? Was it just the?
We looked at several scenarios and just trying to get across the ravine with the trail. That's a fairly deep ravine. It made much more sense to have the backyards face the ravine. There was just no way to get it across.
But now, when we talk about, so the trail is still 10 feet wide. So now it's 10 plus you added something else to what is?
Well, no, it's a 10-foot wide asphalt trail. Anywhere where there is going to be a potential driveway crossing, which we believe is only 2 lots, we will put some concrete curbing to keep that trail edges put together, and so driveways aren't going to create a problem with the trail. But the requirement is asphalt, and so that's why we wanted to do that. And so the residents have a very nice edge to landscape to, but also anyone driving over it, it doesn't break the edge of the trail. But everywhere else, it'll be the same as anywhere else in the city. It'll be a 10-foot wide asphalt trail. So we are doing that just for our clients to make sure that it looks clean, it looks nice, and it stays together for many years.
So have you sold lots along this trail? Is there any objection?
Have we sold some? Yeah. They're aware of
and
it.
they know the trail's there.
They know the trail's there. In any sale that we have, there are stipulations that we include, and they know where the trail is. So, yep.
Right.
And several of our clients are excited about the trail and the connection. So,
I'm really struck by all of these requests, and they're wonderful to see that we're lowering the density. You lose a couple $100,000 lot in this process. With the cost of property, it just boggles my mind that these kinds of things are happening, and now we have it happening quite opposite of what I would think would be requested.
Councilman Campbell, we are selling 3 lots, and they're getting 2 out of them. So it's just clients wanting more property.
That's incredible.
So what I've noticed, here's the interesting thing I'm starting to see in Utah County. Everyone's went really high density. So they've went and done the quarter acres, or you're starting to get, and there's very few areas you can come and get larger lots because everyone's went after the small lot concept, and they forgot that there's a market that wants the larger property. If it be, now when I moved here, we want it for garden horses. Maybe some now want for pickleball, swimming pool, accessory garages, soccer fields, whatever it might be. But we're seeing a different market. That's where we're seeing some dynamics change. That's why we're seeing some of these. I mean, we have 2 lots that are being combined, and we're starting to see these lots that were smaller. They want larger lots.
Well, we cater to clients that want larger properties, and sadly, we're running out of properties that we can do that with anymore. We have a lot of clients that are going to Wasatch County because they can have more property up there. So,
okay.
Well, I couldn't be happier, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I am a little bit disturbed by this request, simply because it feels like an end run around our code.
What you're saying is it was
approved last week at 20, and now we're coming back in to change it down to 19. It could not have been. It would not have been approved last week at 19.
So what it is?
That having been said,
yeah.
If you look at it, 19 lots, you only can have 25% of those lots be smaller than the 40,000 or down to 20. So what's happened is they approved it as the 20. So they can keep some of the smaller lots, but now they're combining, and so that's.
Well, we could fix that by changing the 25 to 34%. Just saying.
Yeah.
Well, and Councilman Courtney, let me address that, because I mean we still can go through that same process, and the difference is me as an engineer, and I really do care about Highland. I spent a lot of time here, and blood, sweat, and tears. I don't want to cut the road.
And that was actually the second half of my point, which is that the reason that I'm okay with this is that we would be in exactly the same spot that we are with the last one we approved. If we say you have to stick to the 20, they're going to buy the lots and come back individually want to do it, and then yes, we're going to have to cut the road. We're going to have to.
Correct.
So it does bother me, but that's why I'm okay with this.
Okay.
Even though it feels odd.
Yeah.
I
understand.
had the same question. That was me and Rob are going, what are they doing? You know, why, you know? So, okay.
I
Okay,
totally,
Council, are there
totally
other
understand.
questions or anything else?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
So I move that the Highland City Council accept the findings and approve the plat amendment to Foxwood Estates, Plat A.
I have a motion by Scott.
Second.
I'll give second to Doug. Any further discussion on this item? If there's not, we'll start with you, Scott, on the vote.
Yes.
Brittany?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
And then Doug.
Yes.
Okay, that also passes 5-0. We'll now move on to item number 3D, which is a farmer market memorandum of understanding. And I believe, Rob Patterson, you have this one also.
Sorry, you get to hear a lot from me tonight, especially with our city administrator, our assistant city administrator out. This was a request, remember discussed this at our last council meeting in March. We had a submission from Heather, who is back there. She addressed the council about a potential farmer's market. As a reminder, the city's policy is we don't allow commercial activity within city parks unless it is a city-sponsored event. And so the discussion last time was, do we want to amend code to allow this? Do we want to partner with this? Or do we want to allow this at all? And the general direction that the council gave staff, as we understood it, was look at putting together a memorandum of understanding, an agreement with Heather or her company to facilitate this and see if the council would be amenable to it and what terms that would involve. So Heather and I have worked together. She's wonderful to work with, has done a lot of work on her own. I put together started off as a simple MOU and became a much more complex document. The proposal is that the farmers market will be held in Heritage Park weekly on Thursday nights, June through September. There will be the exception to that will be not during Fling and not on July 4th to allow other people to use the park and to not detract from the city's other event. There's been a request that we waive our special event permit and any other fees from the city. The one fee that we're not waive, to make it clear, is the city will still require her LLC to obtain a business license to operate in the city, as that would be required for any commercial entity. But otherwise, rental fees, usage fees, those will be waived is the proposal. The LLC is responsible for coordinating with all the vendors, so everyone that comes in to sell, she has to make sure she's already worked with the State Tax Commission, but there's a special event division up there to do sales tax reporting. There's some requirements under the Utah Homemade Food Act regarding selling raw produce or home prepared things. We've talked through that with Heather. She understands that she'll work with the vendors to make sure they comply with it, and we'll leave out some of the trickier items like dairy or meat that require certain kind of refrigeration and special rules. We're just going to exclude that, so we don't have to worry about that at the park. She's put together this site plan, a little hard to see with the light on for the public, but you'll see there's various different kind of proposed uses here. In the park or in the parking lot, you'll see a potential food truck spot. The contract actually does propose up to 2 of those. We thought that might be a good number. There are farm booths and grower tables using the pavilion and near the pavilion. Craft booths are the blue lines kind of running out from the pavilion east. Then there's the kind of reddish orange, the on-site prepared foods. That's people who come in and actually are cooking food at a booth there. And then the yellow is that Homemade Food Act booth. So people bringing produce that things they've made at home and then selling here. It's the general layout. We wrote into the contract that we asked that shift the booths around so we don't create aisles in the landscaping and kill the grass. But this is kind of the general idea of where things would be laid out. They'd have access to the city's power. We'd have them provide their own commercial grade power supplies and the coatings to make sure no one trips over things. There are a few terms that we'd ask the council to consider carefully and decide how you want to move forward, if you want to move forward with this. The first and probably the biggest one is insurance. Heather has asked that the city's insurance cover the event. Our insurance cover, we asked them about that. They recommended to not. They say that's an additional risk to the city since we don't have direct control over it. We do have control kind of indirectly as we monitor the event through Heather, but Heather's ultimately responsible for ensuring all the vendors comply and there's safe operations there. She's done some quotes. Her costs more than double if she obtains her own insurance. There was a financial breakdown included in the report. You can see how that was being proposed. So that is the kind of biggest term there. I don't know if you want to kind of pause on these or if you want me to walk through them all and then have a discussion.
If the insurance is going to be more risk to the city, do you know the cost that would be associated versus the cost to Heather if Heather has to do that? Is it the same, or?
We didn't obtain a quote for increased cost. It'd probably be like how we handle our fling, which is the city operated. We would just make sure that's covered by our insurance. I don't know if they'd charge us extra for that unless something happens, in which case, as insurance policy, rates always go up if something happens.
Sure.
Her cost, as she's quoted it, and I'm speaking very general number, was $200 to $300 per week in kind of a estimate.
Yeah.
So one of the questions on insurance, and I think Ron, you were kind of, if our policy, see, here's the other thing. If we do this next year, are they going to look at this and say, you have this added risk is a policy? So you talk about the taxpayer covering the cost here for a private entity to be able to come in and use a park.
Right. Yes, and there is kind of it's hard to put a direct number to it. There's some impact to the city, and this kind of relates to the second bullet point. There's no direct compensation to the city. There are, I think, intangible benefits of having local growers have a place to sell, facilitating Highland residents' ability to, use the park, have this kind of experience, and also to sell things here. But that's the only real kind of direct. There's no direct compensation. There's indirect from a little bit of sales tax and making this an opportunity. But that kind of weighs against the insurance. Hard to put a dollar amount to it right now, but there is probably something to it.
Am I correct in the understanding that there be no rental charge to the produce local farmers?
You got to come to the mic. Sorry, probably should.
And just make sure you state your names we have it for the record who's speaking.
Heather Harris with the Highland Farmers Market. For the farms, it would be like $10. For backyard growers, it's $5.
Okay, so it's half.
Yeah.
So, Heather, you mentioned when you came and presented before, you were part of like the Food Truck League or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, it was Food Truck Underground.
Food Truck Underground.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know like if you go down to the Provo Freedom Festival or if you're even going to Orem Days, a lot of times they'll require the vendors
to provide their
own insurance.
Yeah.
Are you having that also required by the vendors? Since we're talking about insurance, is that a requirement that you're putting?
So Provo Farmers Market, I know I've spoken to some vendors. They require their vendors to obtain their own insurance. My hope is to try and keep costs as low as possible for our vendors. I want a really low barrier to entry. We've got a lot of youth sellers. I've got I think 8 to 10 youth that have signed up already. And so I'm just trying to keep it very low for them. So that's why that's my big ask, is I'm trying to keep my costs as low as possible.
As far as the revenue for you, you've got the rental that you're going to get for that space, $10 and $5. What is there any other a percentage? What other?
So, for me, I'm going to spend at least like $100 a week on marketing. That's like online ads, things like that, or buying vendor products.
I'm speaking about revenue for you.
Oh, so my personal revenue.
Right. What's going to come into you, because $200 a week.
So when I was, so on that
20 vendors.
Yes. So when I sent in that spreadsheet, I basically was taking my costs and subtracting out, and I think I would probably land between, depending on how well I could book it up, somewhere between like $7,000 to $10,000 by the end of the season. But I'm putting in over 20 hours a week on it. So when you break it all down, that's like $15 an hour.
Your revenue, in addition to the booth fees, if I correctly recall from the agenda packet, that you have potentially some advertising.
Like corporate sponsors?
Yeah.
I'd like to grab some to directly fund, a corporate sponsor would directly fund a marketing thing. I would not be taking that money for myself. So I have a local doctor who wants to pay for the vinyl signs. Someone else, I was thinking of hosting like a dance date night, I don't know, things like that, where it's like it's in line with their mission and they're funding that marketing thing.
But in terms of revenue for the market,
I wouldn't
be.
be-
It would be booth sales and
Just
sponsorships.
just those spots. Yeah.
So then that's my, Rob, if we do the insurance, how much is that signaling out to anyone having any legal potential that by us covering the insurance, is that showing a true partnership with it? And so if there's really anything we really are totally liable, this is really almost like a city function event, how does that look?
With us being the insurance, it is as though the city is running this. We're just essentially rather than having staff members run it, we're delegating that to Heather and her company.
Okay. Hey, Scott, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I try to be polite. No. So I like the idea of this. I like the idea that the city's partnering. And I don't have any problem with the city making a lot of money of it and the signs and the food trucks. I don't have any problem with that. But I do have a problem with the insurance. I don't think the city should pay the insurance for this because, one, the city, except for a little sales tax revenue, is not making any compensation, one. Two, there's going to be a lot of wear and tear on our park every week that we have to maintain. And so I think if they're going to do this, that they need to pay their own insurance. And that's my only objection.
Hey, Rob, I have a question for you.
Yes.
So when we have a reservation, for example, of a for-profit entity, like we'll have Surf renting one of our fields, what type of insurance do they need to have? If it's not a nonprofit that's renting our fields or any of our public entities, do they have to bring their own insurance?
We require a general commercial liability insurance to be carried by them. I don't know off the top of my head what the limit is, but it's probably, I had to guess it's 1 to 3 million is somewhere in that range is the usual amount that we require them to carry for kind of the event type rentals. You know, if a family rents a pavilion for a reunion, we don't require it for that. They have a hold harmless agreement they sign, but for an organization, we require them to provide insurance that names the city as an additional insured.
That's what I've seen. Like when just even going and renting a soccer field, it asks if you're a nonprofit, government entity, or anything other than that. And if you are a for-profit, you do have to then attach your insurance policy to it.
So council, let's come back to the question on having the city partner for the insurance or not. You know, what's kind of the council's recommendation here? Scott, I think gave a recommendation, maybe not.
Can I ask Rob one other question? Rob, so it says no fee shall be due from operator to rent the park or park facilities. And then down further, it says the operator shall rent and reserve the pavilion within the park each week.
That was just, we would waive the fee, but we wanted the pavilion to be reserved so that the farmer's market could actually operate. No one's going to get confused coming into, oh, we got the pavilion, now people are setting up booths outside of it. So we wanted it to be reserved every week by the market, but we would be waiving the fees.
Have we looked at the reservation? Are you thinking what night? Are you thinking Thursdays or when?
Thursday nights. I already booked out the pavilion.
Okay, so I just want to make sure we don't have someone that's already come and booked us also to have a family reunion
Getting
coming,
bumped.
showing up and going, okay, I guess we'll eat off the farmer market. You know? So council, what's your recommendation here on the insurance?
I am in line with everything Scott said.
Okay, so you're kind of no, Scott, since you're no, what's everyone else?
I have no appetite for the city taking on the liability of the insurance.
Okay, so yeah, I think you got your
Gonna get a
answer
lot
on
more corporate sponsors.
Go grab them and that.
I hope you can make it work in spite of this because I am excited about the concept. I like the idea you give the farmers a break, you know, half price, and all of that is a win-win for the city. It brings us together as a community. I just hope you can make the numbers work now that you're going to have to deal with either pushing it to the vendors or taking it on yourself. Looking at the numbers off the top of my head, I don't know how you're going to make it work if you do it yourself. You'll have to figure that out.
She's starting to show that she's pretty ingenuity.
She's savvy,
She's
I'll
showing some
say
energy.
that.
We'll see how.
No, you'll
Got a
do
lot of
it.
spreadsheets
Just
going.
looking over
I
your
couldn't
business
support
plan.
it more, though. I'm excited about it for
Now,
the city of Highland.
Rob, is there a question about food trucks there in the parking lot and what we do at the parking lot?
Yeah, so I'll move on to the
Okay.
You also ask, we usually don't allow signage in the park. We thought it'd be fine if, you know, she wanted to advertise, you know, on the corner at the intersection. There's a Highland little sign there to put a little bit of signs.
What you're saying is a weekly advertising. Hey,
weekly
the farmers
advertising. Hey,
market's
farmers
here.
market's going on here. You know,
Would I be okay to leave the sign up during the season, pull it down end of season, or would you want me putting it up and down every week?
We'd have to talk to Parks whether to interfere with our
If it's a problem.
sprinklers, which is the only concern I would see. It's written in there just as you bring the signs in, we would
Yeah.
approve it. So if you're generally fine with it, let us
Is
know
everyone
either
okay
way.
having signs at the park to show a farmer's market?
I have no
Yeah.
problem
Okay.
with that.
I'm
Do you
fine
care
with
if
it.
it's
I'm
longer
fine
term?
with it.
Now let's move to the
Okay.
next one. You have down parking. Is there quick questions on the parking?
Yes. So one of the asks was, there's not a ton of parking, and ideally we're going to draw a lot of people here. Unfortunately, the other parking areas are the community center and Mountain Ridge Park, which we expect to be also pretty heavily used. One of the thoughts were we have the vendors have a staging. They come in, stage their stuff, unload, pack up, and then park somewhere else in order to reserve the parking for visitors to the farmers market. However, that means they have to park at Mountain Ridge, which is going to be used, or the community center, or on street or something. The question was, do you want to allow other areas to be used for vendors outside of Heritage
So
Park?
let me ask a quick question. So in the late summer and different things, I mean, for years now, the Timpanogos Symphony has used our community center. Are they going to continue using it next year for their practice? Because they do that every Thursday night towards the end of the summer. And so they'll be using a lot of that parking around the community center. So I just, so there'll be a little conflict there.
Do
Which
they do
there
it
might
during
be.
the
We were
summer?
reaching out to.
Well, they'll do it late summer because they have concerts in September.
We were reaching out. Oh, I forgot her name. I'm sorry.
Shauna.
Shauna. We were reaching out to Shauna to see if there was a conflict. She was very excited by this, but she was going to check whether there was a conflict for parking.
She told me that there was not a conflict as long as we excluded those 2 weeks. But I believe that's probably based on the assumption that
So what
we're
your thing is,
severing that
your
relationship.
the vendors for the farmers market would park over at the community center.
Park out of the community. They'd unload in Heritage Park, set up, and then move their vehicles off so that way there's more room for people to actually park at Heritage Park to go to the market.
Speaking of, are the vendors going to be able to drive on the grass there every week at Heritage Park?
No, we said no driving on our grass.
That's going to be hard to enforce because you have people always wanting to dump their equipment.
So let me ask, how late in the season do you plan to do these farmer markets? Will it be through September?
Yeah, since we're very electricity limited at the park, we're not going to do October. We're just going to do September so we don't run into sunset problems.
So you've still got the parking issue on Thursday nights at the community center.
I think they said just two weeks.
That's Doug knows better.
Well, what
Well, you're
Shauna
talking
told me
September and September.
is that within that time period, and I don't remember right offhand, it was at June 1st through September 1st, that there won't be a conflict except for those two.
But that after September, you could start getting conflicts. I think what Scott's talking
Yeah, I'm just talking about the parking issue. If they're
And Scott, I think
Yeah.
that there's also a bigger question that not necessarily handled tonight. What are we doing at the symphony since they're not doing any performances?
in the north end of Utah County, and we've had that discussion.
So it sounds like maybe allowing the community center, assuming there's no conflict.
Correct.
Probably avoiding Mountain Ridge Park because I think.
Now let's go. When are
Which
we
is-
going to be
how
having
can
a
you
bid?
enforce that? How can you? I don't think you can.
We're not going to be really enforcing. It's more of
The
have
other-
Heather talk to people.
It will be in their instructions. The other thing is so that park doesn't have great parking, but it's surrounded by parking because
Okay.
you've got the junior high
You-
and the
you-
church.
Yeah.
You do.
I'm probably going to be enforcing problems with parking in the junior high or the church without.
Well, you have the
permission.
seminary
Like-
building there too. You have the,
So it's surrounded by parking. It's just not a lot is
We
designated.
assume people are going to park in the junior
Fair
high,
point.
and probably if someone gets a complaint, we'll pass it to Heather, and Heather will pass it on, saying, "Hey, stop parking
We'll
in
work
these
through the parking.
places."
Andy, are we going to anticipate anything with the community center having construction going on?
Yeah, we're hoping to. That means we'll have the backside all fenced off. We'll still leave the front, open for parking, but kind of where everybody overflows onto the dirt, we'll have blocked off.
That'd be for our parks building.
For the parks building until the parks building's built, but yeah.
Okay.
Food
Food trucks. Are you fine with allowing a couple of food trucks, or do you want to limit it to one or more within?
I
the
think
parking?
food trucks are fine. Yeah.
Sounds we're good there. Any concern about allowing the city to end the contract earlier if we feel there's an issue going on?
Since we're not talking about the insurance, then I don't have any need to have an exit clause. If we were covering the insurance, then that would be a deal breaker for me. If
So
we
you're
didn't have
saying
that
do
clause.
not have an exit clause?
I'm okay with not having an exit clause.
The contract will only last for a year, and then at the end of the year, assuming Heather does
I
this
decide
and is
if it's
not
crazy or
burned
not?
out by the end of it, and the city likes it, we can continue it, but it's just for 1 year at this point.
And outside of
So
potential
we are
insurance
committing
claims.
for the full year without an exit clause.
Correct. Unless, something goes terribly wrong and there's a breach of contract. But
Unless there's breach of contract.
Right. That short of the insurance claims, it would really be breach of contract that seems like a likely reason why we'd want to end it early.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm okay with that.
So I'm okay with everything except the insurance issue.
Me too.
Okay.
So excited about this.
And let's have a motion.
Before, real quick, before we make a motion, I would actually like us to include a couple of findings in our motion, which is that there is benefit to the city in having that community, that sense of community, and that there is benefit to the city from allowing residents to sell things at the market, just to establish that we really are seeing that there's compensation.
I recommend you make.
Do you want to make the motion then?
Make the motion.
I move that the city council approve
Just
the
approve it.
proposed memorandum of understanding with Highland Farmers Market LLC with the two findings that I just specified.
And with the city not providing insurance.
Thank you. And striking the insurance clause.
Okay.
I will second that.
Okay. Motion by Doug, second by Scott. Okay, now I'm going to go back over to Stephanie. Are you okay with that motion? Do you need any more clarification? Okay, with that, Brittany, we'll start with you on the vote if that's okay.
Yes.
We'll come over you to Ron.
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
5-0. Okay, thank you. We look
Please
forward
let
to
us-
having
yeah.
a farmer's market.
Let us know how to advertise. I put it on social media, but yeah.
If you're going to advertise on social media, you better get your Facebook page up and get approved. Are you up?
No, she's already up.
Okay. You
I shared it.
And you showed her how to get approved so she can do advertising?
She knows how to do it.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, we're now going to go on to our next action item, which is number 3E, which is approval of the Lone Peak Public Safety District financial year 2024-2025 tentative budget. Yes,
You
I'm
almost
not
got
going to
it.
say that word. No, I don't like it.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll go ahead and present this. So last Wednesday morning, the board of the Lone Peak Public Safety District met and approved their tentative budget for the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget. It's a little bit hard to see up on the screen. Hopefully on your screens in front of you can see a little bit better, but the highlighted in gray column would be the adopted amounts. So just a quick overview, the administration amount is $404,671. The police portion is $4,674,652. Fire and EMS is $4,169,072, and wildland deployment of $35,000. On the next slide, you'll see a breakdown of city assessments. So the top three rows there show Alpine, Highland, and total for the fiscal year 2025 tentative budget. The middle column shows the fiscal year 24 or the current year assessment amounts, and then the bottom is the change from one year to the other. One thing that I will mention that we just recently discovered some discrepancies in the fiscal year 2024 assessment amounts. There was some differences in the numbers I was looking at and what was it was Shane with Alpine that found this discrepancy, but the numbers weren't matching up with what he had been given last year for the budget. So in my research, I found that there were a couple different versions of the budget spreadsheets, and the one that I was looking at was not correct. So it doesn't change anything with the budget amounts for fiscal year 25, but it will change the FY24 numbers a little bit. So the change from one year to the next will also look a little bit different.
Will it be more or less than that percentage?
Less, yeah. So
It
basically
actually
what had
reduces it.
happened is when the budget was adopted last year, there was a 10% medical benefit estimate. That's what was adopted by the board. But in one of the spreadsheet versions, my predecessor had changed that to 4% after the fact. So that's what I was working off of, 4%, but what was adopted was 10%. So the new...
What was the reality, though? I mean, what was the real number? Was it
The 4%. Yeah, so our budget is
4%
higher
was
than
correct.
what we're actually paying for that, but it's what was adopted, so it's what we'll show. But the change from one year to the next overall is, so the total 4.4% increase instead of 5.6.
And just out of curiosity, in the agenda packet, it mentioned that the cities have to approve the budget if it increases by a certain threshold. Do you know offhand what that threshold is?
I do not. All I was told is that we should just plan on doing this every year because the threshold, I understand, is fairly low. Is that correct, Rob?
It is, off the top of my head, it's something like it's the same increase of property tax increase we get. So by and large, the budget always outstrips our increase in property tax.
Thank you.
But the tax is only based on growth.
Correct.
Right?
That's why we almost always plan for
And
this
we're
approval.
going to reduce the amount of growth we have in the upcoming years. That's going to be problematic down the road.
So council, this is kind of your opportunity to look at the Lone Peak budget. You have members that are on the board that can maybe answer questions, but also this is for the city now to approve, saying, yes, we agree with what the board has done. This is our oversight of the board. And so are there anything else that needs to be, David, do you need to present on this?
No, I think that's all. I guess I would just mention that in that board meeting, the board members did request a decrease in the amount of wage increase that was requested, if that makes sense. So they settled on an amount that was lower than what was originally requested, which resulted in a decrease in the assessments each.
What you're saying is the departments requested a certain amount, and the board said we did not approve what the request was. They did a lower amount.
Correct.
Council, any questions? Now, Rob, I don't see a public hearing on this, but it's budget oriented. Do we need to do a public hearing? Or is that at the district level?
It's because the district holds a public hearing, but because of our interlocal agreement, the councils approve it. But if it's not our budgets, we don't have to hold a public hearing here.
Questions, council?
Mayor, may I chime in on a couple things real quick on this one?
Yes, go ahead. This is Aaron Wells, our city administrator from St.
Thank you. Two things. To David's point, I think that's something that we for sure want the council to consider is, if you remember right, when we did our budget work session, one of the things council really, one of the top priorities was making sure that wages were in order specifically for some departments we knew were off, namely the fire department. So we just really want to make sure that council understands that as they're considering this budget. And then number two, to answer Councilmember Campbell's question about, property tax growth versus Lone Peak growth. One thing that David and I looked at, honestly, early in the budget process, I thought I was going to have to recommend a public safety fee increase. But David and I looked at what percent does Lone Peak encompass of our property tax and our sales tax. And as we looked at those numbers, it's actually still consistent with where we were at when we first adopted the public safety fee, if that makes sense. So they're not taking a larger, taking is the wrong word. Public safety is not using a larger percent of that budget than they have been in the past. And I think that's something we just want to continue to monitor. If that does change, then I think we would need to look at addressing the public safety fee.
Very good. Thank you, Aaron.
So I have a question because I'm not part of the Lone Peak Safety Board, and I just want to understand this a little bit better because you did some explanation about changing some things, David. So in front of me, I have the fiscal year 2025 Lone Peak Safety Department City Assessments, and it comes to a total of close to $8.6 million for the two cities for everything. Correct? Am I understanding that right? Is that what we've got before us?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so in the packet, it had general fund summary 2025, and it has the expenditures at $9.283 million. Can you explain that?
Yeah, there
so
are
the assessments are different than the expenditures, but I just don't.
There are other revenues that each of the departments bring in separate from the assessments from the cities, and those are what make up the difference.
But I thought the only revenue Well, the main one's the 35,000 they're going to get out of the canyon. Is that correct?
No, so we're talking mainly about like ambulance revenue. For
So
the
that's
fire
on
department.
top of the assessments.
Right. Or the police has multiple police report charges or fingerprinting, dog licenses, court revenues. And then the Alpine School District also pays an amount for SROs in our police department. So those are making up that difference between what the cities are assessed and the total expenditures.
So on that sheet, in the actuals in 2021, and I'm looking at the general fund summary that was in the packet. So the actuals in fiscal year 2021, so that there's a 4-year period, was 7.4 million expenditures, and now we're anticipating 9.283 million. I mean, that's a jump of almost $2 million in 4 years. Is this going to be a trend that's going to continue year after year? Because that's a lot. Am I reading this wrong? I looked at this and I kept thinking that's a kind of a big jump, almost $2 million in expenditures in 4 years.
Well, and
I think a lot of that is there is a little bit of growth in the departments with adding new positions, and then also, of course, the wage increases that have been approved in the past is part of that as well. Probably the chiefs could speak better than I could.
Well, I just wonder if it's going to go up $2 million every 4 years.
And I could, just being on the board, we've had a lot of wage pressure. Over COVID just did havoc in public safety with wages. But why don't we maybe have our chiefs maybe address why do you see a $2 million, I'm going to say Salt Lake City, if they quit giving raises, then we don't have to, but it's a competitive, and I think when we started, I'm going to go back, Scott, 6 years ago, I think our starting wage for a police officer was right around $20 an hour. And I think we're now at starting wage is 28.
Sure.
It's
And
accelerating.
I understand that. And there's always a reason for wage increases and all these expenditure increases. It's just like all the contractors use supply chain issues and COVID and every reason they can to charge a lot more. So my feeling is at what point does this stop? Because we've used this same excuse now year after year. Does this go on for the next 5-10 years? Because we're going to run out of money pretty fast because you can't go up $500,000 every year in expenditures.
So, Chiefs, what are you seeing out there? Tell us what, because this has been our concern. And I think you heard it from the board. We're getting almost this request. It's hard because each year they're getting a lot of requests. What are you foreseeing? I mean, Scott's asking, and I know it's just a forecast. What are you seeing out there? I mean, are you still seeing raises all throughout all the counties and the cities, or are we starting to see it calm down? I mean, we're starting to see some wage pressure slow down out there, but what are you guys seeing?
I think, on the fire side, we're seeing it is leveling out, but we're still, I think a lot of ours is becoming supply and demand. Just finding paramedics specifically has become a supply and demand issue, which always drives the price up. You're also seeing expansion of cities. Lehigh, for instance, right now, they'll have Station 84, which will be an additional station. So, that's going to pull 18 firefighters essentially out of the market. And I think part of that, they drive the increases up, trying to protect their personnel. Really, the drive is to try to protect that service level that we're trying to provide and maintain here in the cities.
That was our fire chief, by the way.
So I'll give you much of the same answer. We're like you. I have wage fatigue. We have this discussion every year for the past 4 years. What's driving it in law enforcement are two things. If we go back to COVID in 2019 and 2020, that kind of shook up law enforcement a little bit. But honestly, the biggest factor that's played into the lack of personnel, the lack of hireable people, is what happened in 2020 with George Floyd. What happened is there was a lot of negativity, right, wrong, or indifferent toward law enforcement. We saw a mass exodus, not only in Utah but across the nation, and that depleted our hiring pool and people wanting to come into the profession. Now that's slowly changing as we move past that and move and make the profession a bit more desirable than it has been in the last few years. Part of that is wages. What's driving it is the lack of, like I said, the lack of the applicant pool, and so we are stealing from each other. Not as much as we were 2 or 3 years ago. 2 years ago, we were down 30% of our staff in the police department. And it was really painful from an administrative standpoint to make sure that we had officers on the road to be able to take those phone calls that were coming in, to be able to answer the calls that the residents were making for law enforcement services. We lost officers to different agencies. We took officers from different agencies. And it's been proven over studies that it's cheaper to maintain and retain your employees as it is to hire and rehire. We were a hire and rehire for several years. Currently, we're down one position. I'm planning on filling that tomorrow. It's much better than it was, but part of this is being competitive with wages. And this budget that you see in front of you, this request is allowing us to continue to do that.
The other thing that I've noticed just throughout, with Spanish Fork, I think opened up a station they didn't have there. Like I said, Lehigh's grown. There's some growth. So they're taking some here. As we've seen some of the wage pressure come in, it's been pretty heavy. As we've tried to, we were down 7 officers, I think, 2 years ago. The other thing is we look at fire. There was a decision. One of the problems we ran with there with COVID is that they were requiring certain officers to work overtime. Well, our part-time firemen, we couldn't get them to come in if there was emergencies. They would always call off, or we were having hard times covering in the summer. So we went to more of a full-time model versus a lot of part-time. If you remember that conversation,
Sure.
And so that's also increased our budget, where we've looked instead of we'd love to fill in full-time or part-time, but we were having a hard time finding those part-timers. So that's where I think with fire we had it, and I really the big thing comes down to service. I think what Chief Pat was saying is your service. We you need to have 4 to 6 individuals on a call. We're scheduling for that backup call. And there's times, I think what you're saying, between 7 and 10% of the time we have a backup call we need to cover. We're just starting to see, we're seeing wage pressure. Salt Lake gives a raise, then Draper and Riverton and all that area, then Lehigh will give a raise, and it takes everything up in northern Utah County up. Now Spanish Fork seems to be putting pressure in Springville with wages on the other end, and we're just getting pulled everywhere out here.
Well, I think that's very understandable. We certainly want top-notch service, but I think it'd be handy, or it'd be nice as a non-member of the board, if the members on the board are that. I would like to know more about call volume, how it's changing every year. I'd like to know how many, hospital runs we're making, what we generate from all that. There's just a lot of details that we aren't privileged to get, because is the call volume going up a lot for the police? Is it going up a lot for the fire? Can we justify this because we're doing a lot more work, or is it just wage pressure? Because, at a certain point, my wages went down 10% last year. And I'm sure there's a number of people in the city whose wages are not going up 6-10% on a yearly basis. So I just, as a member of the citizenry, I just would like to understand it better when I go ahead and vote for things like this.
Good point.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things, David, you don't have wildfire income in here because it's unknown, correct?
We did put a small amount. We put 35,000 just as a placeholder, but it goes in and then back out.
Traditionally, what we've done with wildland revenue, now we have expenses, we have to pay those expenses. We've used wildland. That's where we went and bought some new equipment. We went and got, I think that's our ambulance, how we got some of the ambulances we're having come in. We've gotten some new, that's what we've tried to do to replenish our equipment is wildland, and that's not part of the budget. But it's also, we can't budget it because it's not consistent. Am I thinking correct, Chief?
Yeah, we don't budget for wildland because it's on a call basis. Last year we billed for $400,000, which I think we cleared about 130 after our expenses. Last year was the slowest year we've seen in years and years. Over the past 5 years, we spent about $1.2 million in equipment that's been purchased from money brought in outside of this district Some of it's from Utah, a lot of it's from other states. We deploy all over the country.
So can you clarify again? So we've got $35,000, kind of a marker there for wildlife. You made $130,000 from it last year?
Yeah,
Is
in
that
profit,
correct?
we billed 400.
Well, I know you build 400. It's like all things in medicine. You build a bunch and you get only part of it back.
Well, no, so they built
Yeah.
400 and they had expenses of
but we
270
have-
and profited 130.
Okay, profit of 130. So why aren't we budgeting on a profit of possibly
Because it's
100,000?
unknown. It's not consistent each year.
If we don't get any fires this year in the country, then we won't be deployed and we wouldn't be able to bill for it.
Have we had years where we haven't had any fires?
There have been ups and downs. We're pretty well entrenched in a few states that seem to always get fires. Last year, I can tell you the cities around us did not deploy at all. So we were very fortunate last year to get out the way we did.
Because the revenue is so unknown on this, what we have historically used it for, as the mayor said, is one-time purchases, right? So to purchase a piece of equipment. So if we go on wildland, right, if we get some money, then we would likely be looking at purchasing a small piece of equipment with that money. But we don't want to budget for that or plan for revenue for all of these ongoing expenses, because that's what's left in the fire department is ongoing expenses, just in case we don't get deployed. We'd rather use it for one-time expenses.
So just a difference between like the wildland and our ambulance revenue, we project ambulance revenue, and that's where you see the discrepancy in, you know, the overall cost versus what the city assessments are. We bill about $500,000 in ambulance revenue, which is consistent with the call volume. So that's been progressively going up over the years.
But like Scott, I believe American Fork, who has the hospital, they get almost $3 million in transport revenue. And we're getting 500,000, and we're transporting down the hospital. Once they get there, any transports out of that hospital, they get it. Now, I noticed we must get some overflow every now and then, because I've noticed we have had some calls on transports.
Yeah, we get overflow into Lehigh as well as American Fork.
But I think they're good concerns. Are there other questions?
Well, I just wonder if it's just going up and up and up, because at some point we're kind of running out of money.
Well, and I think that's, so the transparency is that there's a request from the police and fire were higher than what was approved. Like you said, I think even the board had a little bit of wage fatigue, and I think you saw that in what was approved. I think, how much was fire? Were you trying to get like 8 point something in place? I mean, and the approval is for 6, is that correct?
Yeah.
Doug, do you know?
I was just going to say, my recollection was it was about 50% higher than what was requested. It's what you guys approved.
Now, with this, do we need to have a public hearing? Okay. So if there's not, if there's no other questions, are we ready for a motion?
I move that the City Council approve the Lone Peak Public Safety District fiscal year 2024 to 2025 tentative budget that was adopted by the Lone Peak Public Safety District Board on April 10th, 2024.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Doug, second by Kim. Are there further questions before we vote? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead. We'll start with you, Ron.
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
And Brittany?
Yes.
That passes 5-0. We'll now move on to our item number 3F, which is Mountain Ridge Park Phase 2 contract and change orders, and that will be Andy Spencer. Just so you were, there's some residents here that would like to address some things with the park, and so I've given them that this would also be an opportunity that we'll have comment from the public at that time.
So, Mayor, I can give a little bit of introduction to this item, and
is your mic
not
on?
knowing? Yeah, sorry, I might not have been. I probably wasn't leaning into it properly. Not knowing the nature of the comments, I'm not sure where you'd like to have those comments given. If you'd like me to continue with my presentation on the bids that we have before you, if you want to get the comments first.
Do you have an overlay of the park?
Yeah, we do have a site plan in the of the park. Yeah, would you go to the next slide, Brooklyn? And there you go. Oh, there it is. Right there. That's kind of the current site plan of the park. It's marked up with a little bit of the items that We were going to talk tonight, aren't included in the bids, but this is the site plan of the park and the site plan for which we would be awarding the bids.
And so everything that we see on here, is there anything that we're seeing that is part of the park that is not part of the bid part? Oh, I'm sorry, Scott.
Can I just ask a question quick? I mean, this is a burning question. I'm sorry to interrupt your presentation. And I love the park and things, but every contract we have has a 10% contingency fee. And I understand where that comes from, but don't they usually spend all that 10%? I mean, how much do you ever have left? I mean, it seems like we offer that 10%. So of course, if I'm a contractor, I want
actually
all
on
that
the first phase, we didn't spend near the contingency, that we ultimately planned for in the first phase. So we had quite a bit, because you recall, the council authorized 1.3 million in property taxes, and then we had about 700,000 that we didn't spend on the first phase. In our programming there, so that's where the 2 million's coming from that we're looking to spend tonight.
Sure.
I would say on average we use about half of the contingency, a little, probably in the 5 to 6% range.
So I think it'd be great. I know it gets kind of rolled into other projects and that, but it'd be nice to, if once in a while we just kind of heard, oh, we only used 2% of it, or we used 8%, because I'm always left with the impression that we're spending all of it. And so it'd be helpful to know that if you could, Andy.
Sure. Yeah, not a problem at all. Yeah, I apologize. I was headed down and looking up at the site.
No problem.
Site plan range there.
Scott, do you have
I'm just going to get a flag.
Any other questions before you?
That's it. Okay.
I'm sorry, I probably didn't see you raise your hand. So is there anything that's on the plan here that's not part of the bid and would not be included with the second phase?
Yeah, all the items in blue, we don't yet have money for. So we have, if you look at what we have, as I just indicated in my explanation, so the council authorized 1.3 million from the park's impact fees. We had about 700,000 left from the first phase, and then we have a citizen donor that's donating $250,000 towards this phase, towards the ballpark. So that gave us about 2.25 million. And what we are looking at for the balance of the landscape, which includes all the landscape of the fields and the landscape of the ballpark and the landscape of all the edges, is, oops, sorry, I don't want to misquote. I want to look and actually read the number, just under $1.2 million. So $1.197, $625. The trail is going to cost $56,295. And then the baseball field is going to cost $774,000. Now, when I say the baseball field, that's the basic field, the fences, the concrete structures that would allow us to then add some of these elements that are highlighted on the baseball field later. But in the currently proposed amounts, we don't award everything for the baseball because, number one, similar to what I think Councilman Smith was asking, is are we ultimately going to use all of our contingency? We feel pretty good on the landscape number. We feel good on the trail number. We actually have Dustin Larson here with SNL. He is a Highland citizen. If you don't know Dustin, most recently SNL did for the city the Broadleaf Channel up there by Tanya and Josh Colleges and the other neighbors on there. But Dustin has been working with our citizen donor for a number of years on this ball field. And so what we're looking at with SNL is to act as the general contractor for the baseball field. And as we refine some of our bids, then we want to bring some of these items back into play, if you will. So right now, in the 774,000, when we, quote unquote, went to press with the packet, we were still waiting for some of the fence estimates to come together a little tighter. We think there's a little bit of room, with the fence estimates that we can probably bring back in the bleachers into play. We had also wanted to put some nice shade structures over the bleachers. Right now, the budget doesn't allow for those shade structures to be over the bleachers. We had wanted to have batting cages next to kind of the warm-up areas. So what we are doing for sure in the budget is we're putting the concrete where the batting cages would be, and then if we can work it into the budget as we get in and we feel more secure with our contingencies, we'd like to bring on these elements, to the baseball field that would make the baseball field really fantastic. And so, but the items, the items that I think we would bring on first are the items that kind of finish off the baseball field, if you will. The very last item that I think we'd bring on, because it's probably going to be one of the more significant items, would be the little maintenance and scorekeeper shed at the corner that we have planned behind the backstop. And what we would do there is we'd leave a space big enough that it could be added later. But I think that, that would probably be our very last item, because ultimately, if we had to run off our maintenance shed over on the west for a little while, we could probably get by for a time. It's not ideal. It's pretty far from the baseball field, but, we could probably run off that for a little while. Some of the other items that the council had indicated you wanted us to look at was putting a fence around the basketball court to incorporate the futsal. You recall we painted it for the futsal. We just didn't put the fence up yet. And then we wanted to try and make the footprint for the stage. And we didn't think we'd ever have enough money for the complete stage, but we were trying to put down the concrete so that the footprint of the concrete was in. And because the concrete is so destructive, if you will, to build, we felt like we could build the structure above ground if we could just get the concrete in. But we don't have funds for that concrete. And we're working on a final design, so again, we'll get a final number, but and Dustin will help us get that number, but it's one of those that we're probably gonna have to look at and say, are we going to be able to do that now, or is that going to have to wait till later? Love to do it now if we're going to do it, just because then we don't have to tear up things later. But sometimes we can only afford what we can afford. Other items, we've got the maintenance building that we noted over on the west that we're planning to bid with our parks building, which we'll be getting out to bid very, very soon. And then we've got the ninja course. Last week, Councilman Member Rodella and Josh and I went out and looked at a new ninja course that Eagle Mountain is building, and it's actually very, very neat. And I know that there was some concerns expressed earlier, and I do understand the noise and the teenagers. The neat part of it is it caters to another age level, and so we're kind of covering the recreation of the various age levels. The Eagle Mountain one caters to 12 and above, if you will, 12-year-olds and older, where our current playground carries, depending on what piece of equipment you're at, it caters from 2 to 12. And so that ninja course, which is actually more like sports equipment or workout equipment, catered to 12 and above, and so we're getting a better cross-section. But as with all things, it seemed to be more expensive if you go look at the next thing and it's more expensive. So originally, the smaller ninja course, we were looking about $170,000. The Eagle Mountain course is $350,000. Now, if you look at the two, of course, there's a marked difference between the two, but it's what can we afford? So the reason we bring to you what we brought tonight is we looked at it and said, well, what's most important? If we have $2.25 million to work with, what's most important? Most important is finish the trail, get everything landscaped, and finish as much of the baseball as we can possibly finish. When I say as much as we can possibly finish, we'll definitely finish a field. It's all the accoutrements that we can finish with it, if you will, the batting cages, the nice covers over the bleachers, those type of things. And then these other elements, we may have to, number one, we can, again, reassess what budgets we have available. But number two, there's some of these that we may have to, and I'll just take the ninja course, for example. We may have to, plan some very, very basic sprinklers in that area. and then say, okay, we're going to get that in a couple of years. I don't know what all the answers are, because unfortunately, as seems to be as one of the hardest things in the world to do is to budget accurately, right? Forecast the costs accurately, and so we forecast our cost, and then we get down to the hard numbers, and it never seems to come in more or less. It always seems to come in more. So with what we're recommending, we need to get started because, as everybody knows, spring is here. It's time to be working. We need to get started, or we're not going to finish by fall. But we feel really comfortable with what we've got worked out with SNL, and I'd certainly welcome you to talk with Dustin. Josh is here as well if you've got any questions with Josh and how we're looking at it. But SNL is essentially saying, look, we're not going to charge you any extra management. We've got our people planned here for the summer. We're not going to charge you any extra management for anything the city buys directly. We're not going to charge you any markup. And if you want to bring on additional things that are like the stage, we'll get the bids, 2 or 3 bids from their subcontractors. We'll take the low bid, we'll bring it on. If they pay for it, it's 5% markup, which is a pretty low markup. And, so in large regard, that's what I'd love to hear from Dustin, because he has a vested interest in it. He's a Highland citizen. He has kids that play here at the park. And like I said, he's worked over the last 2 years with Citizen Donor to try and bring this baseball field to fruition. So mostly we want to get started and tighten down the numbers and see just how many of these amenities we can, get to fit.
Okay, sounds good. If Dustin's here, we'd love to have you come on up, Dustin.
Yeah.
You're the one that was hobbling in. And I've not met you, but I always have heard your name and all this different things, so I appreciate you coming tonight. Any input you'd like to give the council on this? I think it's mainly the baseball diamond, right?
Yes. Well, so overall, we would manage the entire.
Give us your full
name.
Oh, Dustin Larson.
Is the green light on there?
It is on, yes.
You
You not hear from me? Do I need to lean over? Is that
He's
better?
too tall.
Here, I can be short. Look at that. Dustin Larson, here from Highland. I grew up in Alpine. I've lived in Highland for 16 years. So my kids have played the sports, grown up in all of the events. So from that point of view, I'm very vested in trying to have a good park. Also, SNL, we've been a park builder. We built Beacon Hills Park for the city. We just did Discovery Park for Cedar Hills. We built Shannon Fields for Pleasant Grove, on and on and on. This is a much more popular method I'm seeing right now in city construction. It would be a design build scenario. The difference is we would be doing it with just lower margins, just enough to cover our costs, or if that, but allowing the city to find options that fit and adjust as we needed to proceed and keep the costs in check. We've been doing this a lot with Springville. West Jordan's doing them right now. We're doing Bridalveil Falls with Utah County under this same type of a contract. So we found it's very successful because with the transparency, it gives the city the ability to choose what the best product is at the best price during construction. So, for example, the bleachers. Do you want bigger bleachers, smaller bleachers? Do you want bleachers with handrail? It's tough to know because you don't know the cost. But if we get started, that's something we could make a decision on as we're going through construction. So my role is to make sure that the city feels like they're getting treated fairly, transparently, and we're providing value by getting the best cost on the products that are put into the park.
So my question on the size of this field, is this a normal size field? Is this a good size field? What?
This would be a pretty typical high school field. So this would be for an older age. But that being said, all ages would be able to use it. We'd put a portable mound so that if it needed to be used for smaller ones. But the donor, his kid is coming into high school age, and he's a big baseball guy. And so his number one thing is to have a really nice field that fits that age group. So it would be that if you go, like, obviously Highland does not have a field that meets this need right now. They just finished one at Burgess and Alpine that would meet this, but there's not another one that would meet this age group. So it could be used for men's softball, any of the older age as well.
Is it a standard fence or is it a retractable fence? I'm just thinking.
This is standard. We would right now it's a hard fence. But again, the option with this, if we got feedback from members of the community or from you guys, we could pivot and provide that information. But right now the bid would be just a hard fence, an 8-foot tall black vinyl coated fence.
Okay, on high school standard size.
High school standard size. We do have an option if we wanted to extend, make the fence higher on towards the residents on that side in case we were worried about those. But again,
have we talked to the residents about a taller fence and what
Yeah,
is the status of
that's,
that?
That's some of those, final details that we want to work with Dustin on the numbers because we are a little bit concerned. So just for size of the field is 350 feet at center field, and on the baselines, it's a little longer than 300 feet. It's probably about 310, 315 feet on the baselines. So it's a good size field. It did get downsized. Originally, we were 350 feet on the baselines, and we were about 380 feet to center field, but it just didn't fit. It was just too much. And so this field is a good size field, but it's just been downsized by that, 30, 40 feet. And it fits much better, the way that the bleacher is going to sit, and you won't feel quite so much like you're right on top of 5600 West. There'll be a little more room between the pickleball and the baseball, a little more warm-up area. But we still feel like it's a really, really good field. This is, when we were looking at this with the donor, we looked at the biggest field at Burgess, and this was bigger than the biggest field at Burgess, as I recall.
It is.
Longer.
So Dustin, what your concern, if you were the neighbors down here on this, this could be our south end, what would be your concern and what size of fence would you put in?
So this is where we come in. Right now, I've already have an addition to raise that fence to 16 feet tall. So my price from the fencing contractor is an extra $32,000 to make that 350 feet of fence from the edge down there a 16 foot instead of an 8 foot. So valid concern, and we've identified that, and so we would do a 16-foot fence, or we could potentially do a netting system that would be cheaper but more maintenance and less time. So we would provide either option, and we've identified that as a potential need.
Is it 350 feet? You're saying?
So if we went from the foul line 350 feet, which is take you to about halfway, that would be about 30. It's about $100 a foot is what that would work out if you went from an 8 foot to a 16-foot fence.
How typical is it for a high schooler to hit a home run out into from that distance to the neighbors' backyards?
400 be pretty.
That's like
it would be pretty heroic. I mean, you'd have to have some pretty big kids.
I'll be that kid's agent if that happens.
I know a few, but it would be
very tough.
I like the word pretty heroic.
Yeah. I think if they got it that far, they'd probably want to go pay for the window and take the ball home with them.
Exactly. Yeah.
So since you're here, and I know you're talking about the baseball, we're gonna hear residents. They're nervous about us putting in a ninja course or about the noise by our park, our playground. You mentioned you've done some other parks.
We did we're doing the Eagle Mountain Park with the other one. That's our park as well.
What would be some recommendations that we could look at to try to, would we want to put more trees along here? What can we do to try to help with some of the noise or some of the impact that would be close to those residents by the playground?
So we deal with this on every park we do. There's not one that you're not next to residents. So we've done the multiple items there. Fencing with sound barriers is number one. That's the one, but they're not as aesthetically pleasing. So lots of times residents don't like that. The best one is typically trees. Landscaping. That's what we like to see is heavy vegetation. That's the preference and the one we usually land on because it's the most cost effective, and it adds to the aesthetics of the park versus a taller fence. But there's no great answer to that one. You're gonna have some noise. We did one we were working with Provo City, and they replaced a tennis court with a pickleball court, and they had to do a sound study because the pickleball was a little bit louder than tennis, and they ended up having to move it. So. It sounds a hard one, but I would recommend trees.
This isn't part of the construction at all, but do you know what the cities have done as far as a curfew to buffer that noise problem and try to mitigate it?
That's been another one we've had to approach a lot, and it's very difficult to enforce unless you have lockable fences. I do know specifically on the baseball field that the donor has requested it to be locked so it can be taken care of, so that does help. The next one is security cameras, is to make sure you have cameras there. They have really good systems nowadays. We're very familiar. I don't know if you know the LVT, the Live View Tech. We work with them a lot, and so you get things that have more automated security features, and that's really about the only ways you can deal with it.
Okay. Any questions, Jeff?
I just want to make a comment. I think as a council, we need to be very considerate of the neighbors, but at the same time, and we should do everything to keep things quiet and secure and all that stuff. But at the same time, this is a public park that was always on the plan. And so when people brought their homes, they knew there'd be a public park. And it's just kind of like my wife and I oftentimes talk about it. We get quite a bit of noise into our house with our HOA park in the summer, but my wife calls it the sounds of summer, which really should be pretty pleasant. And there's a lot of, in the fall, we get a lot of sounds from Lone Peak, but it's part of living in a community. So I think you have to kind of find the balance and be respectful, but at the same time, this is a public park, and the good residents that live around this park are walkable. They get to use it the most without having to drive there. So if I haven't yet used the park, but I'm sure many of the families around there have. So, you know, I just think you have to find that balance. We want to be considerate, but at the same time, it is a public park, and it is summer, and it should be used. That's what I think.
And we'll probably hear from some residents. I think what we were hearing from some is the language they're hearing in the late hours of it. You know, and if this is anything like the Harvey Park, I'd be there, and as they turned the lights off at 10, it's like all the teenagers just came and made like a mosh pit, and they just stayed. And you're going, well, hold it. You know, all the adults are leaving, but the kids are staying, and their language starts to change, and they're added. You know, we do happen to have cameras. So when you talked about cameras, we do have cameras. Andy, are they facing the playground? Do we have cameras on the playground?
We have some that cover some of the playground. Not every ounce of the playground's covered yet. We were hoping, on some of the maintenance building and some of the areas on the west, that as we finish those areas, that we'd add some additional cameras. But we don't have every ounce of the playground covered. We have a pretty good coverage in the park. We have basically 16 camera views, as I recall. Josh knows the cameras better than anybody. He watches them and, gets all sorts of alerts about it. But I think we have 16 camera views, and we're hoping to be able to work in a number of more camera views.
So what we could do is go and put a blue light up here, just like that live view. We could fake a live, I shouldn't be saying that publicly, but we could put something, maybe have live view. You know, live view, the Smiths live here in Alpine that own live view. They used to, and they have several, I think some of the partners might be here in Highland. We could ask them maybe to come and put a live view box there, which we see in Home Depots with the big blue light, but that has cameras on it. That's what you were talking about. Is that
what makes those very good is they give you the ability to interact, and so it has some preloaded messages, and so what it does is first it flashes the lights, then it actually will vocally warn them. And then if you want, you can actually use your phone and tell them to leave.
No, Brittany, I was going to say it.
You want it to be your voices? Okay. I've actually heard stores have like cameras down, and if someone's shoplifting, guy in the white coat, we just saw you pick something up, put it back. And I've heard, if you ever been in a store, you're going, why do I have a white coat on?
We do it with our employees. They know they're watching us because the security camera's there. So you guys are working and they can see the camera. So there's some options there. And really security lighting is next best thing, just that turns the lights on.
But if you put lights, that was the next thing. If we put lights, we've had some requests about lights. Would they not stay longer if there's lights on the playground?
My personal opinion is you're better to have them stay lit than to have it go dark and have them stay light.
What about if we, I'm the big thinker. Pickleball goes off at 10. If we kept it on, we're going to have adults more in that pickleball area. Would it be better to have the park stay open a little later so we have more adults in the area, or what's been some experience that way?
That's where the neighbors come in. Is in general, I think your pickleball courts are far enough away from the neighbors that they probably wouldn't affect. The baseball field probably would, but there's very few times you'd have the baseball fields on late. But usually you're better off to leave it lit than you are to unlight it, because once it's unlit now, that's when the bad things happen. So
I've put, for this discussion on park hours and some things, I've asked staff to put this as an agenda item for our next city council meeting. So
Good.
I'm just saying that, we've placed that as an agenda item to maybe.
What are you going to do besides ours, maybe security and?
Yeah, so we can
Because
have
we want
that-
to prevent vandalism, but we want to be considerate of the neighborhood.
And this is where it's valuable, where if I'm in the situation for the design build, I'm happy to come and give options, to participate in meetings, to listen to complaints or how can we solve problems, and we bring you solutions. So instead of having to go through bid process and do this, we'll find you and you say, hey, this is a concern we had. This is a solution. What would the cost be to implement this solution? And I will be happy to come and meet with neighbors or you or whatever to find whatever solutions you desire.
I really appreciate your offering that. So thank you. With that, since we keep hearing about the neighbors, I'm going to now allow some time for some residents here in this by the Mountain Ridge Park area. If they'd like to come up, please state your name. If you can keep your comments brief, and if someone's already said it, just say, hey, I just kind of support their comment, but you'll come up and give at this time.
Is this about the contracts we're doing, or
This
is
is
this
going to be about the park design, what we're going to be awarding, and then because this might be affecting them on some of the things we're awarding.
Okay, not curfew or hours or
No.
anything
So
like
that-
that.
Well,
Okay.
it does cover over into that. Okay, my name is April Slade, and I live on the west side of the park. And I want to address, actually specifically Councilman Smith and Mayor Osler, that I know, first of all, I've thought about that. Like, I bought in a park, and I knew that, and I knew it was coming. I thought it was coming later, but I knew it was coming. And I know that in general, people don't like change, right? So it's hard to shift from what you had to what you're going to. But, and I've even thought about, like, that's the sounds of joy. That's the sounds of happy. You know, I've tried to think about that. But I know when I bought next to the park originally, and actually I came and spoke to you, Mayor Osler, with my husband at one of the open houses. And we talked about, well, I told you that when I knew I was buying next to a park, I thought the park was going to be big, not big. And that's made a big difference, because now I walk out my front, and I mean that big globe, you know, and but it looks, I mean, I'm 4 houses down, and it feels like it's in my backyard. So that kind of shocked me. So if you think about, it ages me. Parks when I was growing up were little. They might have been wide, but they were little. And this is huge. And I feel bad for the people who live like right in front of it, because it's huge. So just keep in mind that is some of the dissatisfaction I think that has come. You know, that's not something we could have foreseen. And we also spent a fair amount of time. In fact, you suggested to us that we donate towards the trees so that we could get more sound barrier, and that's been brought up as a solution. I'm looking at this, and either I'm not seeing it or they're not marked on there because it's a different kind of, but the trees are kind of gone. So I don't know if it's just the wrong kind of schematic or...
This schematic wasn't intended to show the trees. It doesn't show any of the trees on it. It was just showing the overall layout of the park.
Okay.
And the elements.
And
Fair enough.
the trees are between the trail and the fence.
And I
Yeah,
know
for
we're
the most part,
interrupting
the
it.
trees are between the trail and the fence.
So
to
what-
keep the play fields open for play.
So my question, how much of a gap is there between the trail and where the fence is?
At the wide point, it's about 25 feet. At the narrow points, 25 to 30 feet. At the narrow points, you know, where it comes pretty close, it's about 8 feet, 7, 8 feet.
So it kind of depends on which house you live in, how close it's going to be.
Fairly closely. Kind of a
So,
standard.
you know, on a, like, coming with solutions rather than problems kind of thing, I think it would be really, really good to look at the size of the trees and that kind of thing ahead of time. And you talked about raising the fence on this side, on the south side by the baseball park. Has there been any talk of, I haven't even considered that was an option, but has there been any talk to the residents? Well, we haven't, none of us have heard about any talking to us about raising the fence on our side.
It's the
So maybe
baseball
that's
field
something.
fence.
So the baseball has like a chain link
Yeah.
fence. It's that
Yeah,
big. It's not
I understand.
the border fence.
We're gonna get soccer balls instead, but that's okay. Okay. And I know also there's been a lot of geotagging and TikToks about the park. So I know that it's had a big surge right now in visiting. Maybe it's not a local, we know people are coming, I mean, from what I can see on the posts, people are coming from everywhere to come to this awesome new park. So, you know, that may die down, but, and I know that some of the problems we've called in about, like there's been, you know, the teenagers peeing down the park, it sounds like they're dropping boulders, you know, that all goes to what we were talking about, monitoring it and the time and stuff. But I have a son. No, I have older kids. My son's 17, my youngest one, and he was excited about the park. And after this has happened with the noise and these stories, he's a little less so. So he's not using it. So I just wonder if we need to think about, I mean, I don't know how you control that, but you need to think about the balance of, is the park for the residents or is it for everybody? And maybe we can't really control that, but just taking into consideration, there are those of us who live here and there are those people that live in Salt Lake that are coming down, and it doesn't affect them at all. So,
I think you're probably closer to 3 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll stop there. But my husband had a few things. We had a family funeral, family death, and he had to go to England all of a sudden yesterday. So he was supposed to come. So I have his comments too.
So can I ask a question, Trevor? So I really appreciate your comments, and we want to accommodate that. But what we need to hear is some potential solutions.
Yeah.
Because the object of shutting down the park or tearing it down isn't an option.
Yeah. No,
right.
I understand.
Okay, so can we put trees? Can we put a higher fence?
Well, that's kind of where I
Can we
went,
put
yeah.
a curfew? Can we, I mean, my mother would have bought a cartload of soap to wash the kids' mouths out in the old day. I mean, I was always told that. You say bad things.
You know, I wish we could still do that. We probably would get sued.
I know.
The kids have more power than we
that.
do.
So
Yeah,
it's
it just doesn't work the
disrespectful
same.
to you folks,
Yep.
and I understand where you're coming from
Yep.
because I deal with the road in my backyard now and stuff. But what we need is some viable solutions because I don't think we're going to shut the park down.
No.
Yeah.
No, but
Yeah.
I think we know that.
Yeah.
But there are some considerations about more park going in, like the Ninja. That's what I think these guys are going to bring up. So I will stop now. I may ask for permission to read my husband's comments later because I kind of have to count as two people because he's out of the country.
Yeah.
But I'll pass it over to them
Why,
for right
why
now.
can't you do it now?
Go ahead if you have other comments you'd like to.
Okay, I'm just going to read what he wrote, okay? He said, so in addition to the park curfew, here are the main talking points, as I understand them. We were surprised to hear about the proposed reintroduction of storage building on the park's northwest side. In previous council meetings, it was agreed that the storage building would be relocated away from its original location beside the houses to a new location away from the parks. I think they talked about it being on the side of the parking lot. We need to clarify the details. We don't have any information on the reason for the proposed reintroduction. It just seems like it came out of the blue. I think that was really a lot of his concern, as we believe the previous decision was final. Additionally, we do not know anything about the size of the proposed building. We're unfamiliar with the proposal for a Ninja Park, since it is a recently proposed introduction. We lack information about the details on the proposed park, which actually is shown up today, including its size and intended purpose, which has come up today. There appears to have been no report or information on a study on the Ninja Park's location directly behind the residence fences, and we found that it's been difficult until today as we're talking about this, to find out these details ahead of time. So that's really the points he brought up, but I think that will come up in the other comments. So thank you for letting me read that. Thank you.
So can I ask a question? So isn't this a little shed or something that we're putting some equipment in? I mean, it's not that great big building that we had problems with 5 years ago, right? Yeah.
I just emailed Brooklyn a picture. I'm hoping she can throw it up there real quick.
Councilmember Smith's talking about 5 years ago, there was a plan that there was actually our public works maintenance building for parks was actually going to be moved to this park on a 1 acre site. That's what you're
right. But this is just a small kind
of.
of.
This is just a small. This is mostly. There will be some. Parks equipment housed there for the kind of daily parks tasks and daily tasks, but a lot of it's for the events actually, so that when we're having the fling and things, they can bring down things, store it on site. So the building, as rendered there, is 24 feet wide, 30 feet deep. That's a 10-foot door or a 9-foot door. Sorry, I think it was, Josh remembers 9. I think it's 9-foot tall door. Right there, like the roll-up door is 9 foot tall. So the total height is, about 16 feet maybe. So it's a pretty small building for this big of a park and the type of events and things we're trying to run here. It's not like what had been discussed in the past was the parks operations building. So this isn't the parks operations building. This is the equivalent of, I know it's not exactly a tough
park
shed,
storage
but it's a shed to have on site to store for, you know, for example, during the fling, during the different parts of the day, they bring out the PA system, they take the PA system in, they put up the little pop-up tents, they take them down, they put up the tables, they take them down, and so this is kind of the kind of quick storage shed for the events there also, so we can have some you know, basic tools on site, basic cleaning elements and care elements for the parks crew. Not to have the full parks crew dispatch out of here, but we're trying to have somebody who comes every morning. Right now our crews are coming every morning, but we're trying to have a designated person who comes every morning for a few hours every morning and gives the park a once-over, if you will. And this is the once-over base of operations. So it's not a real, you know, big operations building. It's just a shed that you got to have a place to store some of this stuff if you're going to do that work.
So, Andy, how far from the west boundary of the park are you talking about on this building? Because I see these schematics, but I don't know how the distance.
It's about 30 feet off the fence there. It's over on the west. It's just north of the Ninja Court. Brooklyn, I don't know.
But if there, I guess we look at, if there was a house, if this is subdivision, this would be the side setback where they could be with a house.
Right, but in between the building and the fence, we can plant a bunch of trees or
Yeah,
vegetation.
we do have to keep.
Yeah,
this
you can put a
little-
buffer
We
for
have
the
to keep
neighbor.
This little alleyway that I'm kind of highlighting here, it will be grassed. When I say alleyway, I don't know how else to describe it, sorry, but it
Corridor.
will be grass corridor. Thank you. That sounds much nicer. It will be grassed, but in order to have the events, like, you know, for the fling, we bring out the blow-up toys and everything. They bring those out and pick up trailers and everything, and so we've got to have a way to get the vehicles out on the grass. So this little corridor that goes right here, it'll have a few trees up in this area, but mostly it's got to stay open just because we've got to have the way to get a vehicle in there to take, you know, whatever out onto the play fields. We hope we don't have to take emergency services out on the play fields, but if we did, that's how we'd get them there too.
So I think you've expressed the need for this, but is there a way to change city code or make an exception that we can put a higher fence up, that we can plant more trees? I mean, I want to kind of address possible solutions as we talk through this because we need to be respectful of the neighbors. And, you know, but at the same time, it is a park that we all
So
want to use.
the reason the question is not necessarily the comments, the public comments are not about the noise. It was about, they're concerned about the Ninja Course, they're concerned about the plan. This is kind of our final plan. And that's why I've kind of said, hey, if the public would like to come up and address about what our plan is. Now, naturally, they're nervous about the playground being close, but there also, I think there were some questions about Ninja Course, so hopefully we've answered that. They had questions about the maintenance building. And since this was going to bid, is why I kind of said, hey, if you'd like to make comments, because we're now discussing having it and awarding the bid. So with that, is there some other public that would like to?
If I can chime in one little bit on the mains building, and I think I said it earlier, but what our plan is with the mains building, since we are hopefully any day putting out the mains building, I'm just waiting for the architect to get me the final plans and specifications package, and I email him about 3 times a week. But we're planning to bid this building with that because our thought was that we're going to get the best economies on that building by bidding it to a building contractor who's just building us a building right down the road.
Yeah.
And so that bid will be forthcoming as quick as we can here.
But the Ninja Course is not going in at this time.
The Ninja Course,
anything
we
in
don't
blue
have,
is not going in.
we don't have money today for the Ninja Course with what we're talking about today.
But
And
there's space for
that's where I indicated kind of as we looked at what was most important, we felt like most important was having the park finished. And there's various versions of finished, right? Finished could be every last little thing we want, or finished could be, hey, if I pulled up and I didn't know that there was, you know, these other 4 elements planned for the park, I'd look at the park and say it was finished. That's probably the version of finished we're looking at, is everything will be green, everything will be planted, there will be trees, there will be trails, there will be ball fields. But there will probably be some elements that are on the to-do list, you know, and as we can figure out more money, we'll chip off more of those to-dos this year. As we can become more efficient, we'll chip off those to-dos.
So
isn't this agenda item just about contracts for the the baseball field,
Sure.
the soccer fields, and the trail around it. And so I just don't feel comfortable talking about anything outside the agenda if it's not listed in our packet and open to the public, that they know that we're talking about other
So if
items
there-
outside of
so
that.
the next meeting will be, we're going to be talking about curfew. We could be talking about some sound barrier.
Sure.
So that, for the public, to understand, even for the council, I think that's what you're
But is the maintenance building in this?
No.
No.
No, tonight.
But you want to
tonight-
bid it at the same time
No,
as the
but it's not
cemetery.
part of this bid.
Yeah,
Okay.
Tonight, the motion would just include the rest of the landscape. That would be with Stratton and Brat, who did the first phase of the park. The trail, the asphalt trail, if you recall, the council changed. Originally, we had concrete going around all the outside, and the council said we'd prefer an asphalt trail because people like to run on an asphalt trail more. So basically, asphalt where the trail is done to today, up on by the playground, it meets, and it's just an asphalt trail around the outside. And then it would include the baseball field today. And our commitment to you is that we're going to work with the contingency monies we're talking about and with the efficiencies that we've talked with Dustin about, try and come up with the very best baseball package we can.
Sure.
with what we're awarding today. So anything else, and I'll list some of the others, the Ninja course, the maintenance building, the stage concrete, the futsal fence, the exterior boundary fence, all of those elements would be another discussion a different day.
But let me ask one last question. So they're going to put in the landscaping and the trail.
Yes.
So how about between the trail and the fence? Are they going to plant the trees? Are
Yes,
they gonna
this
landscape
includes
that?
all the, and I apologize, we can get to the full planting plan if
Sure.
you'd like to see it, but yeah, it includes all the trees and things that you've seen with the plan. The plan that I had put in the packet and the packet and the PowerPoint was just simply more focusing kind of on the council, hey, the things we've talked about doing.
Okay.
But yeah, the landscape package that's bid here includes all of the trails, the rocks. So basically, if you will, inside of the trail, in the ball field envelope, everything's basically grass. There might be a couple trees around the outside edges, for people to have a shade to sit under when they're watching a soccer game, but it's basically grass. Outside the trail, it's all xeriscape with rock and shrubs and trees.
And lots of trees.
And then I've mentioned to some of the residents here, if they would like to donate towards the park, they can donate specifically for trees, that then maybe we can go and we would plant back behind their home.
Right, because now would be the time to plant the bigger
Yes,
trees.
so that, actually, I guess
Yeah.
now that
Now's
we're
the best
done
time
about
to
this is
plant
now,
'em,
as a council, we probably had to go talk to those residents along here and say, hey, we are getting ready to plant. Would you like to donate to add more trees to get that foliage, to get the closed in, if it be for
Because
those-
that's a natural barrier.
Yeah.
Buffer.
Yeah.
And it's a beautification barrier too. I mean,
Yeah.
look, you put a big
Beautification
fence
is
up
sound,
here,
it's
they're going to
everything.
see a fence in their backyard versus a tree in the backyard.
Sure.
Now, the question I have on the trees, are we putting pine trees or are these more trees so in the fall there'll be leaves off, or are pine trees being part of the plan, and could pine trees be part of the plan?
The pine trees can be part of the sorry, get my tongue tied there. Sorry, apologize. This is like trying to say the word fiscal for me. The pine trees can be part of the plantings. Right now, my memory, and I'm looking over to Josh, is it's mostly deciduous, is what I remember on the plan right now, meaning the variety that lose their leaves in the fall. We can certainly incorporate some additional pine trees in those areas, but right now the plan's mostly
I would,
deciduous.
because that's a year-round barrier. And then Kim and Brittany can decorate them for Christmas.
You want the Christmas lights to move over here. Okay. Anyway, at this time, is there any residents like to come up and address what is before us as the plan? Like I said, if it's going to be park hours or things, that will be in another council meeting where we'll be focusing and discussing that. Are there things that you guys like to come up and discuss here on the park?
Mayor, just one quick comment about the trees. I think we do need to remember to be careful. We can't necessarily promise more trees because we have to think about how big the trees are going to be when they're fully grown. But we can talk to the residents about, our plan only affords us to buy this caliper of a tree, but if you want a more mature tree, donations would be helpful in that regard.
Good point. Okay.
Good evening. Yeah, Brad Weber. I live at 10366 North Mountain Ridge Way. I'm the second home off of 10400 North. So my house would be directly west of the proposed Ninja course. And the reason I wanted to comment today was because the plan that for the budgets that you guys are approving, in the schematic, it has laid out for a Ninja course. My concern is, as I've monitored this and listened to city council meetings or looked at agendas, and what's even on the city's website are these renderings that don't show a Ninja course and show trees, where today the testimony is that there's going to be a driveway. So where to access the rest of the park, there's going to be a driveway. So I don't know how you guys are putting trees in there. And if the trees grow, so that's my concern. My concern is that we're starting down a path where eventually we're not going to be able to put trees in. So I just want to make it clear that my family and I are opposed to the Ninja course, because if you look at the map, it is the only amenity in the park that is close to residential. Everything else is far away. If anybody on the soccer fields or the baseball, they are hundreds of yards away. Again, on the schematics that are on the city's website, we're talking about the buffer between the playground and my property was supposed to be grass and trees. And now we're talking about a Ninja course. And so that's my concern. We'll certainly come to the next meeting to discuss our concerns about the curfew and noise. But I just want to make sure that I'm on the record with the city that when I purchased, I understood I was purchasing next to a park. I did not expect that I was going to have a Ninja course within 20 feet of my boundary, and wanted to make sure that the city was aware of my opposition to that. Thank you.
I have a question for you. When you purchased, did you think it'd just be grass and trees, or did you have the understanding there'd be a maintenance building right there behind your house?
We understood that the maintenance building was a proposal. During our due diligence, we communicated with the city about it, and we understood it before we actually closed that the maintenance building was going to be moved. I think the city was purchasing a metal building from the county. And so that went into our decision to purchase, certainly. We had no idea about the height of the park. And again, I'm not anti-park. I want you to know that. I understood I was buying next to a park. Mm-hmm. Like I think every resident that borders the park, we were not aware that it was going to be a red orb in the air. But again, I recognize that it's going to be an asset for the city. My concern is that I think what the city is proposing to do is especially affecting a couple of the properties as you come into or you turn off of 10400, directly adjacent to my property and the Dowdles that are here. It's different than what everybody else would experience. There's significant space between my property or other properties in the park, whereas I would have a Ninja course, again, within 20 feet of my wall.
We're not covering the Ninja course tonight.
Again, my concern is that it's on this plan.
Right, and I realize that. But what I'd like to ask of the staff is when we do that, I would like to know what the history is of when it was added to the plan and what communication was given to the residents, to the neighbors. I'd like that history presented to us, because I don't understand how it's there now and it wasn't before.
And I can just tell you from my experience and everybody here, we all saw it on the agenda, and that's why we're here.
Okay. So
yeah, we had heard rumors about a dog park. My wife emailed the council, and that's why we're here today.
Okay. So when we do that, I'd like to request that we have that history outlined for us so that we better understand.
And to help run, we can go back. I think it'd be good to look at our minutes. There has been a conversation of a Ninja course when the playground has been looked at. What was that? And the reason,
and I will do that.
And that's, I'm just saying. So this is not the first time that a Ninja course has been brought up.
And I understand that, but I would like to know just a bullet point.
I think, and I think for the residents, because like you said, was it on drawings? I recognize that there's probably been discussion, but maybe it was not formalized into a drawing. I think we all kind of maybe knew it was different drawings. We were going to have a Ninja course where it was going.
Sure, but maybe there's another place you can put that.
We'll have to look. Okay, any other residents like to come? Battles?
All right, sorry, I'm really tall.
Good evening. My name's Stephen Dowdle, and we live at 10380 North Mountain Ridge Way. We're the very first and most northern house there. We back up to what we call the nice space station out there, in orbit. And yeah, right outside of our back windows, we did expect a park, and we are happy that there's a park. I would definitely want to express our frustration with some of the proposed future plans, including the Ninja Course. What we did not expect was to be backing up to an amusement park, and that is a little bit what it's turned into. If you come by on any Saturday or Sunday and look at the parking lot, there's basically no parking left currently, and there's already no baseball field, no soccer fields. At 7 a.m., people are utilizing the pickleball court, and that's great. And I'm excited, and we love living there. We have 3 children who have visited the park, and sadly, they don't enjoy the park because of the type of individuals who are frequenting it. They've experienced other kids urinating from the top of the park playground. They'll bring boom boxes, and this mostly occurs in the evening hours. And so it's caused a lot of disturbance. But obviously, you want me to address anything about the proposals. The reason I feel like what I'm sharing tonight is valid is that some of the decisions being made tonight involve the entire plan going forward. Things like a maintenance building. What he described was more of like a 3-car garage, not a shed. 24 by 30 is about a 3-car garage. That's quite large, and I know that one of the proposals tonight included an option of a maintenance building as part of the baseball diamond. I would prefer, as a citizen, that the baseball diamond receive a maintenance building where some of these items could be stored, like he said were needed to be stored for various activities. Not necessary to put it directly behind a place where our home is, and then we cannot buffer it at all because they're going to use it as a driveway, so we have no ability to put any trees. We have gone ahead ourselves, and if you've driven by our home, you can see we have about 20 tall trees in our backyard. So we've done our best, but I can tell you that the noise and disturbance is quite substantial. We love a park, but we didn't expect to live next to an amusement park. So yeah, that's what I'd like to share.
Okay.
Any questions for me?
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Okay, with that, council, is there any questions about the proposal on the agenda for the approval of the park on phase 2?
I'd make a motion if you guys are okay with that.
It looks like we may have
Oh.
We have Wes.
Keep going.
Mr. Warren.
Don't sound excited.
That's actually
Mr. Warren.
Wes knows the timeline of
Well,
everything.
I come not necessarily
If you
representing
could
myself.
state your
Wesley Warren, live next to the park. Super concerned with my neighbors, and I'm trying to get feedback about what's your experience been. Noise level after dark, everything. And there's been some really good feedback tonight. I have just some things I was going to read from Paul and Rachel Adams. I asked them at length, just being right there, front and center, what have your experiences been? And they said they have not had a big problem with noise. We do hear light hitting back and forth with the pickleball starting in the morning until night. The lights are a bigger pollution for us, light pollution. But we're just happy the park is there. I think we may have more noise when baseball soccer portion of the park is near us is finished, but we're looking forward to that. We do see teens there very late, little shadows of bodies sometimes through the night at the park. We don't hear the teens much at night. The lights are the biggest problem for them. Sometimes just faint voices and some pops from pickleball paddles. They are, I asked them about the playground equipment, and they said it's about as what they expected as far as height and everything out. And And then I was talking to Cody Dingus, who lives on the west side of the park also. He said he's fine with the playground equipment. He's fine with everything as proposed. The teens at night, and they'll come back next meeting with and address these things. But I told them, and I don't know if I haven't talked about this too much with you, on the council, but I'm really concerned with, the experience of living next to the park. I don't see a big problem with some of the things that are, slated to go in. But I have been researching ways other parks, best practices, other cities and parks have put into place to stave off growing parks and the changing face of parks in the US, including things like sonic emitters. Those darn youths work on a different frequency than us old folks do. So, and also keeping lights on all night long. Not the big lights, but more kind of visibility lights that are down low on the ground. But we're happy to share all this next meeting. Just wanted to get on the record real quick with these other residents in my neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Kim, I think you have a motion.
Yeah.
Yep.
I will respect.
If you'll please just state your name.
Yeah, Mackenzie Weber. I'll respect your wishes and talk next time, but I have the complete opposite experience of him. It's been miserable, and I'll save it for next time, but I just want to be on the record that I came to speak and didn't get a chance. So, Mackenzie Weber.
Okay, Kim.
I move that the City Council approve contracts for Mountain Ridge Park Phase 2 with Stratton and Broad in an amount of $1,317,388 and 18 cents. Eccles Paving in an amount of $61,925, and SNL Inc. in an amount of $851,726, and authorize the city administrator to sign the contracts.
I have a motion by Kim.
I'll second it.
I have a second by Doug. Any further discussion on the motion?
The only thing that I'd like to request is, Andy, if staff can take a look at that landscaping plan and make sure that we really have enough room for good tree coverage between the path and the fence, because it looks like we could move the path into the park a little bit further. And if we don't have room for trees, I'd like to see us doing that before we pave it.
Yeah, take an evaluation and have the landscape architect take a good, quote unquote, hard last look to make sure that we've got enough room for good tree coverage.
We'll have to deal with the motion in front of us, but I'd like to continue this, to be honest with you, because I have concern about we're approving the layout the way it is now, and you have this corridor that has to have an access for emergency vehicles, for all the summer equipment that you're talking about. You can't have both. You can't have a corridor there and then have trees to buffer it.
Yeah, and
it seems like we've got a dilemma here.
Well,
so
I guess
we'll deal with the motion, but just on the record, I have concerns.
I
guess the point I'd point out is that number one, if it is going to be a multi-use park and we are going to have our events there, we've got to have a way to get equipment out there, right? And so somewhere it's got to exist there, but certainly we as the staff members are going to follow your direction. But I do want you to understand, as far as the park design, if you look at the park design, the park is full through the middle. So the only places you can drive into the park are on the edges. And once you get away from those edges and pull into the middle, it's not going to be a paved drive. It's going to be grass. We're not going to be running, besides lawnmowers, which we're going to run there every week. We're not going to be running equipment all the time, but I understand the concern about the conflict with the trees and be able to pull in. And I have listened, but we do have to have a way. And so the way in is on the south side, is right over the trail. We'll pull on over the trail, but that's going to be lighter vehicles. And then on the west side, we've got to have a way to pull in something to have the various events and the things that we anticipate having there. And so because everything in the middle is full, cut off by the things we built, those have to exist. Now, I understand the concerns about the Ninja Court, and we're not approving that tonight, and, you know, and there's plenty of time for discussion there. But my concern is if we don't get started, and if we don't get cracking on it, we're going to have a hard time finishing this year. And that's, you know, I don't want to ever push harder than we should push, but that's my concern is
We
I
were hoping to
understand.
have this approved back in February. I mean, at least to get the contract going.
Yeah.
And so, okay.
Understanding
We
and
have a
approving,
motion
Peter.
before us. We have a
Yeah.
motion of Kim, second by Doug. If there's other discussion, Scott?
Okay, but at the same time, I understand we've got to move on this, and it's an appropriation of approximately $2.2 million, which is fairly significant. But at the same time, I just think we need to have a plan in place that we're going to address some of the concerns of the neighbors, and maybe have to redesign things and come up with solutions. And I'm just asking that, Mayor, when can we do that? I mean, because if we start building and doing all this stuff, I know this is what we're approving now, but shouldn't we have some sort of plan for how we're going to address these issues? Because I think there's some real anger developing, and we've got some things that we need to talk with the police and all this stuff too. But I think when you, but
I guess the question is that deal with the approval of? the
okay,
bid?
well, I'm going to vote against this then because I think we've got a lot of open things. I agree with Ron; it should be continued a little bit because I think we've got a lot of issues here that need to be addressed, and I feel like I'm kind of being railroaded into this without addressing these things and being kind of told it's not important. So I'm concerned.
And I hope.
A couple.
Oh, please go ahead,
Go
Aaron.
ahead, Andy.
Go ahead, Aaron.
A couple of thoughts. We certainly, I hope that you don't feel railroaded by staff, Councilmember Smith. That's not our intention at all. Our understanding from the council has been get this part done as quickly as possible. And if there is any hope of us doing that this year for phase 2, that's why it's before you at this point tonight. And we are operating off of the most recently approved plan, which, I mean, as you know, Councilmember Smith, there's been a variety of approved master plans for this site. And so we're operating off of the most current one that we assumed council was still all on board for. Out of curiosity, I did a quick minute search to see how long we've been talking about a Ninja course, and it's been since 2021. The conversation really picked up in 2022. The residents are absolutely right. There is no Ninja course map on the website because we've never had a map that included the Ninja course because this park has gone through so many different design iterations. I could probably put up 10 different designs that we've had throughout there. We have been talking about it for quite a while, but they're absolutely right. It doesn't physically show it. It does talk about it on the website, but it does not show it there. So I guess it really staff's kind of at a point where we just need you to tell us if you're comfortable with this design that we've been operating off of is what council wanted, then we would recommend approval. If you want to talk about redesign, we can, though that means delay and that means cost changes too.
Can I have one of the contractor, Darren, do you want to come up and help us with some of the questions we might have on how this moves forward?
And maybe this is, it's a little bit, sorry, it's a little bit atypical the way that we were looking at this. The reason that Andy has brought us on isn't because this is finalized, it's because it is not. I'm an asset to help identify and solve these problems, not to hurry and build the park. So our goal as a contractor would be to take these into consideration and make adjustments as needed to meet the needs of the community. So our proposal to Andy is based on some budgetary numbers to allow us to make adjustments as the information's needed. So the goal would be is to get the process started, and if the information comes in and we need to make adjustments, we would then be a tool to give you those pricings and the budgets to make those decisions. So even though it shows the Ninja course, it doesn't necessarily mean that there has to be a Ninja course. It means that we're here to help you understand what that could cost and what it could mean. And if it's not approved now, it doesn't have to be approved. So my goal as a contractor would be to get the project started and then be an asset to the community to help decide what are the best solutions to these problems instead of just waiting and having to have an engineer do it. So That would
Mayor?
be my intent.
Currently on the Ninja course, is there room from the Ninja course to the neighbor's property on the west side for both a corridor and trees?
I don't believe so.
That's
but,
my concern.
And this is where I would say right now, in this proposal, we're not approving the Ninja course. And if we wanted to make some sort of a note on here that says those items would need to be approved separately, I think that would be appropriate. So that all those blue items on there are not approved and would not be approved in this budget and would have to be approved
We're
by
not
the
approving
council.
that tonight,
No,
is
the
that
Ninja
right?
course-
Yeah,
No, the
and that-
Ninja course
that's-
cannot be built under this contract.
Okay.
Any of those items in blue cannot be constructed without future approval from the council.
Okay,
And that-
okay.
Mayor?
That's,
Can I guess my 2 cents with this is we have this contract here and it includes most of the things that we have already talked about, the trail and the fields and things like that we know we're going to do. Now, if we decide the trail needs to meander in a different way, I think we can approve this without precluding that. But what I would like to do is maybe get together. I always volunteer for stuff, but maybe we could get together a group of us along with the contractor and these residents who live close to the park, and so that we can talk them in a smaller setting and understand their concerns ahead of a meeting instead of right now. So I would say approve this budget with the things in it, understanding that we're not building the Ninja Park yet or any of these other things, and then taking the time to sit down with residents who live close to the park, talk about noise, talk about light, talk about stop signs, right, and all those other things we need to do. So that would be my recommendation.
I'd like to be part of that too, Brittany, with you.
There's the 2 council members. I think you're fine to kind of get together and let's have them talking. Okay, we have a motion with a motion. We have a motion by Kim and Doug. Any other further discussion? Okay, thank you. I think we're ready for a vote. So let's go ahead. We will start here with Kim.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Scott.
No.
Brittany.
Yes.
Ron.
Yes.
That passes 4-1.
And if those residents who want to get together and talk about that, if you want to email myself and Councilmember Campbell or all of us together, we're happy to put something together.
Well, I'd like to be part of that too.
Perfect.
So
Good, 'cause
that
I'm-
sense,
If
you know.
wanna
I'm-
have
go
three of
for
you,
it.
We'll have to be a public meeting.
I will let,
Right.
I've got some family stuff going on, so I'm happy to defer to Scott, but I would like to be part of the emails and the conversation.
Right.
Yeah, Scott, I'll work with you on that.
Well, why couldn't we have some sort of public meeting though, where we have more than 2?
We could.
people? That's what I would recommend.
Yeah,
I
just
just like to
24-hour
hear.
notice.
I didn't realize there were all these problems with the park, and I think we need to address them now before we build more of the park.
We could have
Yeah.
an open house where you can have the residents come in. We could have all the drawings.
Yeah.
So,
I think there's got to be some sort of.
but maybe you
compromise.
two could kind of meet and understand the concern, so we kind of know what to kind of put together. Is it okay? So Scott and Ron will kind of be working through that. Okay, we'll now move on. We'll work with, yeah.
At 10 o'clock at
We
night.
can work with the open house. Some an open house also meant, we could work through where that location's at. Okay, we're now moving on to item number, Scott, I think you wanted to make sure 3G, which is the 2024 Street Preservation Contract Award. Andy?
oh, sorry.
Item number
got
G,
distracted.
which
I
is
apologize.
the 2024 Street Preservation.
Yeah.
I just had one quick
Oh,
question
is
on
it
it.
H?
Yeah, so I held it just because I had one quick question. When I looked at all the maps, it seemed to be uninhabited neighborhoods that you were doing all this road construction.
Yeah, so what these are is when a subdivider finishes the work, they have 2 options. Number one, they can treat after the year at the end of their maintenance period, they can treat the street with a seal coat, or they can pay the city and give us the money, and then we'll come and treat it. And typically, what we do is we wait and we treat it at the time that a number of the homes have been built, or at least the dust has settled, so to speak, for a while, and we can get in there and not have the street ruined. And so some of these do have actually more homes on them than shows on the photo, which is kind of odd because photos are fairly current. But our street superintendent went through the number of subdivisions that we had, and he said, okay, I think we can treat this one and this one and this one, without having the home construction or continuing home construction do.
I was just
more
curious
damage.
why every one picture you had didn't have any homes on it.
Yeah, so these are just the ones
Yeah.
that that, and we try to get the right amount of money, and these have aged out 3 or 4 years, and so of course with the economy, we're having to chip in a little bit, but these are what you're looking at tonight are streets where they're subdivided in the last few years, and we're using the developer's money, and like I said, unfortunately that's aged out a little. We're having to throw in a little bit of city money, but trying to get the seal coat on them, and that's why they're all new looking, because they're just that seal coat. So
Okay.
a good portion of what you're awarding is funded by the developers on them.
Well, thank you very much. That was my question, so I'll make the motion, Mayor, if that's okay.
Perfect.
Oh, except I've got the wrong one here.
So it's number H.
Oh, okay,
Oh,
I'm
sorry,
sorry.
yeah,
Let me get there.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. So I move that the Highland City Council approve the contract to Morgan Pavement for street preservation in an amount up to $70,940 and authorize the city administrator to sign the contract documents.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Scott, second by Ron. We will now start with you, Doug.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Brittany. Yes. Ron.
Yes.
And Kim.
Yes.
That passes 5-0. We're now on to resolution Alpine Highland Justice Court Interlocal Agreement. Rob.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you might recall, at the end of 2023, the council passed a resolution asking to recertify the Justice Court. As we went through that process, the State Judicial Council asked where our interlocal agreement was with Alpine for how we're managing that shared court, and we delved into it and realized we didn't have one. We've been operating together for a very long time. We have a very set way of doing things, so this is just formalizing that arrangement that we've already been doing for many, many years. The general terms, the court remains Highlands Court. It's just over in the police building off to the side. We are responsible for certifying it, funding it, providing training, staffing, security, all of that. We just expand the court services into Alpine. We appoint the judge and set their salary in accordance with the state regulations. Each city continues to contract separately for their own prosecution and defense services, the indigent defense, though I think we historically have shared prosecutors and defense services because it saves costs. And Alpine pays 40% of those overall costs. They pay a rent payment, they pay the judge's salary, the clerk's salary, 40%. They get invoiced monthly. Alpine actually approved this last week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. So they are on board with this. They've had no concerns. Does the council have any concerns or questions for me on this?
I don't. I'll make a motion. So I move that the Highland City Council adopt the resolution approving the interlocal cooperation agreement for Justice Court services with Alpine City, as stipulated in the agenda.
Second.
Yes.
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 Yes, we've got the bylaws that Rob, you've looked at, and we're okay with it.
Yes, Erin wanted to clarify. She left in the staff report the highlighted
Yes.
portion saying we hadn't looked at it, and that's because she highlights things when she's going to talk to staff about it, and then we talked about it, and we just were trying to publish and forgot to take that part out. We reviewed it, and we didn't have any issues.
As long as you're good
I do
with
have
it,
a
then I
couple of things
recommend
that
we approve
I
this.
would like to. I do have a couple of things I would like us to change in it.
Okay. Can you outline what that is?
Yeah. It says that the committee must comply with all open meetings laws as set forth in UCA 54-4. It's actually 52-4.
Yeah, that's probably a typo, my typo.
I would. It discusses participation from the police department, from the fire department.
Yes.
Is there a reason why we would not include participation from the police department as well? That seems like that'd be
that's a very
useful
good
thing.
point. That's a very good point. It was just my understanding at the time that currently the fire department had somebody number 2 in command, if you will, that was over emergency preparedness. I've learned since then that that's not necessarily the case. So I think involving both would be judicious. So we can change that in the motion if we can.
Do you have any?
Yeah, just as a historically, the fire department has been the one that has been charged with emergency preparedness. We do have, the police department does have an individual that participates in Alpine's emergency preparedness meetings and planning, and so we would be happy to be part of Highlands as well.
And then there's a comment. Sorry, Ron, you made a comment that the fire is not having anyone for emergency preparedness?
Right, just talking to the chief. You don't have anybody assigned
I thought Jake
necessarily?
was assigned.
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily assigned. He's attended a few of Alpine's meetings, but not necessarily. Doesn't have the capacity to.
This will
really
change
work
that.
on it.
I just have a few questions. For this committee, how many people have already asked to be on this committee and have volunteered or want to volunteer
I'd
for
have
it?
to add it up. I think there's 4 or 5 that I've got, and a couple of them are really strong candidates as far as their knowledge and background.
Perfect.
Personally, whenever we're creating an ad hoc committee, I would like to see us put a deadline on things. If we're
Yes.
creating a standard committee, that's an ongoing committee. If it's an ad hoc, I'd like to see us saying, okay, for a year, then you bring back your recommendations, and one of the recommendations may be that we create a permanent committee.
Well, inherent in the bylaws are specific accomplishments, if you will, milestones that I think when those milestones are met and we check off everything that's in those bylaws as it's outlined, that that's when we would end it. To put a date on it, I'm a little bit concerned about that because I don't know all the resources we have to put something together, like an emergency preparedness plan for the city, if you will.
I guess from my perspective, the purpose of enhancing resident awareness is something that doesn't seem to have an endpoint on it.
Yeah, that part of it's true. It's just those other check marks, if you will.
I'm with Doug also. I'm not a big fan of creating ad hoc committees that then don't meet and serve no purpose. So I'd love to review it within a year and make sure that it's working the way that we're wanting it to work and serving the purpose we want it to serve.
So I'd like, Ron, I really appreciate all the work you've done on this.
I agree.
And I agree 100%. Would it make sense to have a 5-member committee? Do you really need 7? I mean, you want an odd number, of course. But I would think with a smaller number of people, if you've got some experts on, you can move faster. What do you think?
Well, it really boils down to the caliber of people we're able to bring in. If we've got 2, say we are at 5, and we've got 2 really good candidates, if you will, I would hate to limit it to 5. So I think if we do 7 and then have the option of changing that if we have to, if we can only find 5, if you will, we'll come back and ask for a change for that. But I also think we could do a quarterly report to the council in terms of where we are at and what our goals are and where we're heading.
So maybe I haven't read this carefully enough. How often would you meet?
It'll be up to the committee once we're organized, but I think at least bi-weekly initially, and then with a goal of going monthly down the road. But we've got to meet more frequently early on because we got a lot of work to do. I asked for where an emergency plan is for the city, and nobody's been able to point me to it. So I think we're almost starting from scratch.
Maybe to Councilmember Smith's point, we have a Highland Fling Committee that has in the double digits of members. I don't know if they've technically held a meeting because they haven't formed a
They've
quorum.
never had a quorum looking at the numbers. That's a problem.
If you have 3 strong members, it might be hard to get a 4th to form a quorum for 7.
Right.
I don't know how many strong candidates.
I think
just
a
to your
smaller
point.
number would be more
You're
flexible.
still going to have your board be 5. You can have more people attend more than the board.
Right.
I like that. Actually, I'm all for that.
Yeah, I think it'd be more flexible, and
flips
you'd
my
be
switch.
because my experience with volunteer committees is a lot of people volunteer, but nobody comes.
Yeah. Well, I've got really good candidates. that I'm
What's been
thrilled with.
surprising, we've had 4 or 5 really that I've passed on to Ron that have come in with real strong interest and asking about our emergency preparedness. So some of it depends on sometimes what the religious community is doing out there. If they're pushing some things and you see If they're saying, hey, I want to get involved, or I want to go further in this involvement, then they might be spurring some things on. So what the plan, now I have a question. It says the attached bylaws are draft is not a full review by the city attorney. It's being presented to council for preliminary review. This is an action item.
That is spurious text.
That's we
a
meant to
mistake.
remove that before publication.
Oh, this is what I'm pulling up on the city website.
I know.
Yes.
Okay.
That's been redacted.
Okay. Our city attorney says it's been redacted.
The last change that I would like to make, and I apologize, I did not look this up, so I'm going off of memory, but my recollection is that resolutions take effect 30 days after they're published. Do we need to put takes effect immediately?
Resolutions take effect typically immediately upon adoption, unless you say something else. Ordinances are the one you're thinking of.
Perfect. Good then.
And I want, Ron, thank you for taking the time to put this together, to research. I mean, this is the beginning. There's a lot of work now going ahead.
I can't speak highly enough about the residents that have come forward on this. I'm really excited to get this organized and moving. It's them, not me.
So I guess the thought is maybe in our recommendation is to change the committee to be from, instead of 7 to be 5 would be something to be, we're making a motion to make sure that's part of that motion. And then do we need to change something else you're saying, Doug?
I had 4 changes.
Okay.
One was the reference to OPMA. One was adding police representation. One was setting a 1-year deadline for a final report recommendation to the city council. And the final was changing it to a 5-member board.
I think rather than 1-year deadline, that we have quarterly reports that we come back to the council. And the council could at any time decide that it's time to terminate. We can do a quarterly report that I think would be very productive and helpful.
I could live with that instead of I would prefer a deadline, but I could live with that as an alternative.
Is that a strong point for other council members?
Wait, you're asking to do quarterly reports? Can I do biannual reports?
I can agree with Kim on that.
Okay, do we have a motion? Okay, we got an agreement here. We're now ready to move forward.
Mark this date.
Okay, with that, do we need to repeat the motion that
My understanding is the motion will be to approve it as presented with 4 changes. One is to correct the OPMA reference. One is to add police representation. The third is to add biannual reporting to the city council. And the 4th change is to change it to a 5-member board.
With that motion, is there a person who'd like to?
So moved.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay, so I have a motion by Doug, second by Scott. We'll now go to vote. Brittany?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
And Scott?
Yes.
5-0. These next items are just an expedited, as part of our thing is 4A is the action for our general plan contract award, which is Jay, but Jay, I don't think Jay's on the call.
It's me.
Oh, okay.
I apologize. It's me again. This is an award of the general plan, but I am the planner now, so it's in my purview a little bit as well. As the council may recall, we issued an RFP at the end of last year. We formed a committee. We had a couple of city council members on that. We had some planning commission members and staff. We received 3 proposals. Out of the 3, good proposals all, but the committee recommended Landmark be selected as the city's partner in moving forward with the general plan update. So just as kind of a general information, I will move that down, I guess. Total cost of the contract is $127,855. That included a optional feature that we all thought was worth it. It's the social pinpoint engagement tool. It's an online tool. People can drop pins anywhere in the city and put comments about concerns or things they like. Then can be gathered into an overall plan update. So if someone has concern with a street or an intersection or something along that nature, we can kind of get more specific information. So we thought that was worth adding on to the contract. The term will go for about a year. We're a little bit behind. So we're supposed to start in April, so we're a little bit behind, but they were willing to be a little bit flexible on the end date. And this was their proposed schedule. So you see several meetings with a new plan advisory committee throughout the rest of this year. 3 different public meetings with different purposes. One is scoping, one was to start presenting some ideas, and the final was to kind of go over the details of the proposed plan. Leadership briefings, meaning reporting to the City Council and Planning Commission at least twice. The goal was to have a draft plan towards the beginning of next year, and then subject to revisions and changes to hopefully have an adopted plan towards April or May of next year. So with that, happy to answer any additional questions.
Are there any other questions? If not, we're ready for a motion.
I just have a quick question for Ron and Doug that were on the committee. Why did you think this was the best group to work with?
I know I personally reviewed all of them's previous work, and they had done some previous work that none of them were perfect. Let me just say that. I found issues with every single one of them. However, having said that, the kind of issues I found with Landmark were very much something, hey, let's not do it this way. Little things like the maps on the website, the resolution is so poor you cannot see what it really says. I mean, that's a problem when you have a general plan that you're publishing for the public to see. Those little issues we can resolve. And Landmark far and away excelled, in my opinion, over the other 2 options we had.
Okay, I respect your judgment.
And to me, it was the end product of the examples that they gave us. And on top of that, Jay called references. And he said that every single reference from Landmark talked about how wonderful they were and that they would unstintingly offer to a recommendation.
Great,
use them.
that's great.
Okay, with that, we ready for a motion?
I move the City Council approve the contract with Landmark Design Team.
I'll second it.
Yeah, a motion by Ron, second by Scott. Ron, we're going to start with you.
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Brittany?
Yes.
Okay, 5-0. Okay, we now are on discussion items only. These are not actionable to be voted on. These are only for discussion. Andy, you're going to discuss the culinary meter reading technology. Just so you're aware, at this time, we are at 9:55. Maybe do we want to extend the meeting now till certain times so we can just keep with our discussion? We do have a closed session, just so you're aware.
I move to extend the meeting until 10:15.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, we are now extending till 10:15.
I'll be quick.
You just wanted to say nay.
This one's a
I
fairly
get it.
this one's a fairly quick item. So right now we read our water meters by what we call a drive-by system, and so we put a reader in the truck, and as the truck goes down the street, the signal comes off of the water meters, and the truck gathers it, and we make a circuit through the city, once a month, and gather all the water meters. With our pressurized irrigation system, we have constructed what we call a tower system, and so there are 2 large antennas. There's one over by well 1 on 5600 West, and there's one up by the Hog Hollow Pond. Those towers will collect all the data from all the radios for the pressurized irrigation system without driving around. And so what that allows our pressurized irrigation users to see is they're able to see what they used on their lawn this morning. Now the technology, you can set it how frequently you want it to report to the tower. We're going to set it so it's about every hour because these need to last about 20 years. So they guarantee them for 20 years. And so if the battery fails sooner, they'll replace it. I think there is a prorated component at 15 years or something, but essentially it's a 20-year warranty. Right now it's taking us about 15, 16 months and counting to get these radio units. And so what we're looking at is we're actually looking and talking about something that even if we were to walk it out tomorrow and order, we probably wouldn't actually get these units for 18 months. There's still a COVID backlog, I guess. I don't know why the backlog is what it is, but you can tell there's a little exasperation in my voice going, how can it take that long to get these things? But what we're anticipating is that when we finally are able to get all of the pressurized irrigation radios in, and we're still waiting for those. We're putting in the meters, but we're going to have to go back and retrofit some of these radio units in, that we'll be able to do a big push out to our citizens and that, hey, you can now see what you're using on your pressurized irrigation. There was an older type of radio that only read to the drive-by unit. The last several years, we've been putting in the type that would read to the tower. So we have a little over 5,000 meters. We don't know exactly the number of the newer units, but we're almost getting the tower run, and very quickly we'll know how many aren't reporting, essentially, and how many aren't talking to the towers. And so we'll be able to come up with a really good estimate. We've estimated we have about 3,500 older meters. And so really the question for the council is, at the point that people, this is a little bit of speculation by the staff, but at the point that people are able to see their pressurized irrigation meter usage, we're anticipating that some of them are going to say, why can't I see my culinary water usage? And so this is really a discussion item with the council. Is this something that you would like to look at? Because it is. If it is, then we're probably looking at something where we put in an order, decide to put in an order, and we aren't deciding that tonight, but we decide to put in an order. We get the units, a year to 18 months down the road, and then we have to install them. So you're still probably a couple years out for people being able to get real-time usage on these. One of the nice things and niceties that they bring is you can also sign up then to get leak alerts. And the system will pick up if you're continually using a certain amount of water, and it'll send you a leak alert, things like that. For our pressurized irrigation, this was actually mandated in one of our grants that our system that we put in had to provide people essentially real-time data on their usage.
Can you get a grant for this?
Let's ask our legislative consultant to get us a grant, and then I'm in favor.
Fair enough. I like it.
Is that a possibility?
It might, yeah. I mean, this is the first time we've even talked with you about it, and so actually I smiled, but I like it. But it's something that we wanted to start to talk to you about. It's not something that was in our rate studies to date, but we anticipate that people are going to ask that, right? And so just wanted to kind of have some initial discussions.
Do we know what the savings are from putting these in? 'Cause we're not going to be driving around.
I mean, we save. It takes our team about a day to a day and a half to make the circuit through the city. So yes, while a day of labor represents something, it's not probably a game changer from a labor standpoint. Probably the game changer is for the citizens to be able to get the leak alerts and to be able to, have that real-time feedback. Is really, where the citizens would notice a difference. And like I said, this is us looking down the spyglass and saying, we don't know for sure, but we think that a logical question from people is going to be, well, I can see my pressurized irrigation meter. Why can't I see my culinary?
So I'm just curious about funding again.
Yeah.
Would this be appropriated through the enterprise funds?
This will be through the enterprise fund.
But there's a chance maybe we could get a grant or at least apply for one.
Yes, this probably is something that we could pursue grants on. I would think that, and we haven't gone very far down the road with this yet. As with a lot of things, we just kind of have an initial discussion and say, hey, this is something we probably ought to think about, and then we start peeling back the layers of the onion and figuring out where we can go with it, so to speak. But we asked the supplier for a quote just so that we had a framework of, hey, what might we be talking about? It's about $650,000 in parts. That doesn't include the time and labor to put them in, and we would anticipate that in large measure our crews would be able to put them in, but they'd be elongated over a few months. And but yeah, I think it's something we can chase grants for, but it's not something we've anticipated to date in our capital planning. So we want to kind of put it on your radar, get you thinking about it, and we'll be back doing a little more talking, if that's fair enough. So, unless anybody has any questions, that's all I have to share on that.
Very good. Thank you. We'll now move on to the next one. This is a communication item. this is about the school district boundaries and Rob Patterson. We reached out just.
We
There was an item before that,
There
Mayor.
was an item 5B.
Oh, is there? Oh, I'm sorry, Alpine. I was just looking, I was reading some of the Alpine. Yes, it is, item 5B, which is the Alpine Fence Replacement Program. Everyone
think
here-
we have some
Just as a
residents.
thought process, this could be a very long item. So I don't think there's necessarily a time limit on this one. Like a time urgency, I should say, on this one, unless council really wants to get moving on this or residents are really anxious to get moving.
Well,
So
I think the
do you want to
paramount
start
issue
this
is
conversation
well,
at 10 o'clock?
right.
But at the same time, you've had people that are affected by this come to the meeting at 10 o'clock.
Oh, I apologize. Having not being able to see that, that absolutely makes sense.
Okay. So with that, we do need to be sensitive time. It's a little bit after 10. So let's go ahead, Rob, if you want to do a high overview. I think most of us are familiar with this.
I think you're all familiar with it. It's just based on the last conversation the council had, you're leaning more towards a grant program is what we heard, at least a majority of the council. With that, we kind of came up with 6 questions that we need the council to answer, whether that's tonight or in the future. The first question is, how much money overall do you want to spend on this? Second is, how many years do you want this to operate? Is this a 1-year thing? Is it a 3? Is it a 5-year program? And then the third is related to the previous 2 points. You put the money up front. So if you say you're picking $200,000, it's just a number. Are you putting that up year 1 and it's used till it's gone? Or is it $50,000 every year for 4 years? How do you want to weigh that out? And then the next question is, then once you have the totals, how much do you offer per resident on a per linear foot basis? As we looked at it, it's roughly every $50,000 gets you about $10.75 in linear foot cost grants.
So can you remind us how many linear feet this fence is?
4,650.
4,650.
So if you divide that out by 50,000, you get about 1075. So if you offer the more, obviously the more you offer, the more increments that goes up. The next question is, how many residents need to apply together? Will you allow it for just one resident who does their fence, so you have wood and then whatever gets approved? Or do you have to have a group of 3 or 4? What happens to those that are left behind is just staff looks and says, okay, everyone else did it, you're fine. The final is, what designs do you want to allow? In the staff report, we kind of provided a few different options, so you can see the current, a CMU, a concrete masonry unit, and then a precast concrete, which you can find any number of styles. We just kind of picked 4 as examples.
This is, since we have time, maybe we can kind of start trying. We talked about having 250,000, maybe recommendations on how much money is the 250, and maybe have the program over 2 years. Over 2 years, money available would be for a grant process. If there's 4,650 square feet, that would be at $53.63 per linear feet that they have, and then they would need to apply for that. I think the question, I'm just saying, I'm just trying to move so we can.
Right.
It would be what the design, if we want to say, okay, it has to be CMU or it has to be block. We don't want to see another wood fence. We want this to be more long lasting. Would be have to be something consistent, so it's consistent. If we're saying that we're trying to do something consistent, that's what our whole thing is. There needs to be some consistency along that road.
Something consistent, and that, I'm sorry, Doug, to interrupt, but something consistent and that's going to have a good lifespan.
Yeah.
And I think we were kind of talking about the 250 because that's what was kind of proposed to fix the other fence, which would be a short-term thing. I like the grant process. I'd split it over a couple years. I think we can do it. I mean, we just approved $2.2 million for our park. I think we can do a tenth of that split over 2 years to fix this problem in the city. But, that's my opinion.
Can we say that it has to be CMU or cast concrete, or is the wood, because that was originally approved, necessarily an option?
Not if we're getting
No,
grants.
if you did,
Not if we're doing a
say you
grant.
have to do CMU or precast. You could also just say just precast, or you could say as long as it's CMU or precast, we're fine with it.
Well, and do we want to put a color? I think we want to say we want to keep that red
We want it
color that
consistent,
is
yeah.
along that they all. If we're given the grant, we can give a lot of respect. Hey, we're going to do this color. This is the material we're only get the grant for. Does that sound like the direction that most of the council want to go?
I'm still not comfortable with $250,000. I think that, when you talk about the park that serves every single one of our residents, 21,000 residents, and this is a fence that serves 30 residents, and it's setting precedent of is this city property or private property? Are we okay with funding people's private fences? Does my fence now need to be fixed by the city as well? I think that there's, though, is a sense of obligation from the city because of the miscommunication of whose fence this was, but I don't think it's a $250,000 mistake. I'm more comfortable with $100,000 to help fix this mistake.
So I understand where you're coming from, Kim, but at the same time, I think it's kind of not true that this doesn't serve all the city, because much of our city drives by this fence. It's an eyesore now. So I think it's a part of a beautification thing. So I don't know. I think it makes sense to do what we can to get it fixed soon, because we can keep arguing about it. We've been talking about it for 2 years. I don't think we'll ever come into a total agreement, but I just think we need to move ahead with something. And maybe there's a compromise between that, but I think it serves the whole city because, you know, we've claimed it was a city fence for years. That's the problem. It's a unique situation. We're not setting up a thing where we're going to fix everybody's fence. This is a unique situation. We're trying to solve the problem, in my opinion.
I mean, I can see what Kim's saying, that you might have someone on SR92 saying, well, I have more cars go past it on SR92 or over on 4800. Now, I do think you're going to hold it. We had said the ownership. I mean, I understand we can say, hey, this is why we
but
did
we've
it.
never told those people that
I
that was
agree.
a city
That's
fence.
right.
Yeah.
Not only that, it's not been the landmark that fence has been as far as I'm now in Alpine. I'm now in Highland because of that fence. I do believe it's been a landmark that's identified Highland, and it's been a positive thing. The concern I have with going less than 250,000, if we go 100,000, there will be those residents that literally can't afford to do it. And then we're going to have a patchwork all the way through there. Even at 250,000, I don't know what percentage that's going to be. It depends on our final design. But if it's 60%, maybe they can come up with the other 40. But what if they can't? Then we're going to have a wood fence that's not been replaced, and 3 sections of a nice fence and 2 sections of a wood fence that's not replaced. That concerns me. So I think the bigger amount lessens the probability that that will happen.
That you bring up one of my concerns is, if we're now looking 2 years down the road, this is now done, and we only have half the fence done, and we're going, okay, what we thought we were going to do is try to do beautification, and it really made this hodgepodge look.
Yeah, and I'd move it quick because it's just going to get more expensive as everything on.
That's the council. What do you want to do? And that's kind of get
So I kind of feel like there has to be something in the middle. I think that 250 is a lot. I think 100 probably isn't enough. I'm wondering if we could go somewhere in the middle, but extend that program for maybe 3 years instead. I'll tell you what, this is my thing. That public safety meeting that I was in last week was one of my least favorite meetings that I've ever been to. And I've been to a lot of meetings because I feel like we are making really difficult choices with what we're funding. And so it's very hard for me to go to a meeting like that and make, I mean, it was a rough meeting.
Yeah. And so then you think of what are your priorities right now?
So I think I agree. We need to do something. Nate's here. We need to do something for this fence. You know, I think it's probably more than $100,000. I would like to spread the cost out for longer. We know we've got this council for another couple of years, and if we set up a program, I don't see another council just, you know, not saying they're going to stop it after 2 years. So that would be my preference as something,
Are you thinking
as
like
usual. in the middle.
50,000 each, so it's 150? What are you thinking?
Well, I have to think a number.
Well, let's talk about amount per linear square foot, or per linear
Sure.
foot. That's what you have to base it on.
Because 150, a total of 150 gives us 32.25 per linear foot.
And the interesting thing is, it will be interesting to see how many people take us up on it. So how much it's actually going to cost. I don't think that everybody is going to take us up on it. Yeah. What if we started something like 70,000 a year or something? I'm just throwing a 75,000 a year for the next 3 years.
That's 225. That's
225. Yeah. I was working the math in my head. I don't know. I guess I'm just saying, I know this is a discussion item. I would be in favor of doing something over a more extended period of time, just so we have the opportunity to budget for it and to save the money.
my concern with doing it over, I agree with 3 years, but I am concerned about limiting it 75 to each year, because the first year, the costs are only going to keep going up. And most people are going to look at it and say, let's stretch out our finances and let's get this done, because next year and the following year, it's going to go up 10, 20, 30%.
So let's have this.
A total
We'll see
amount.
if people have, like my family, I couldn't afford to pay any amount of money for a fence right now. I'm just saying I would have to save up. So what if we start with an amount this year, and then if it's not all used, we roll it over to the next year?
Okay.
Now, this is just an action item. We're given direction for a motion to come back later.
And I'm amenable to amounts. I didn't have anything set in my head when I was coming in here.
I mean, you brought, to be honest, Brent, you brought up a really good important thing. Here we were really beating down our police and fire for wages to try to support them. And yet also we're just kind of, let's do $125,000 a year to go for a fence, but yet we turn down our...
But Mayor, I'm sorry. We're talking about a $250,000 one time. The police and fire have increased their budget by $500,000 in the last 4 years, every year. So it's a big difference. And I'm not sure that we're getting more service. What we're getting is we're competing with other cities. This is a one-time fix for a problem that's getting progressively worse and more expensive over time.
And the crazy thing is it's comparing apples and oranges, but that's
Right.
what we have to do. Right?
Anyway, council, give some other direction. What is the number? What do we want to see come back as a motion?
I say 125 for 2 years and get it done, which is 53 per linear foot. I mean, maybe you can compromise between 200 and 250,000, but I think you have to have it and get it done, because it's just getting more expensive, like Ron said.
Doug, what are you thinking?
I'd be good at the $200,000.
You're good.
Yeah, I'm more
whether
comfortable
that's
with
one time
100,000
or
a year,
2 years.
not a 150.
So you're thinking 100,000 for 2 years at 200,000 is what we're hearing. Is that Ron? What I'm hearing from you?
Yeah.
Kim, what do you?
I don't want to go above 150. I just don't think that this is something that it wasn't on the priority list, to be honest. And so for me, this is something that I think we need to rectify. We made a mistake, but I don't think it's a mistake that should cost us $250,000. I'm fine with $150,000, but I drove around all over Highland City on the major roads, 4800, SR92, 10400, looking at the fences. They're all hodgepodge, and I've never noticed, to be honest. My eyes are drawn to all the open space and trees and trails.
I actually agree with Kim on this. I changed my position. I think 75,000 for 2 years would be equitable, given what we've done with public safety. It's unfathomable that we would put public safety behind something like this.
So I think maybe you have some direction, because my guess is we're going to have this conversation again when it's actually on the agenda. So I'm not sure it benefits us to have it. Now the residents have kind of heard what we're thinking, and we can get their feedback before it's on the agenda again. And I would say next time we should vote on whatever it is.
I think we have direction to come up with at least a couple of motions and some options, and then we can kind of hone it down next time. So, thank you.
Sounds good. Okay, we are coming in. It actually is 10:15. We do have the school district boundary. Are we okay just to have a high-level discussion on school district boundaries? Yeah,
I think we should continue it.
Because of timing, if we could have even a 3-minute discussion, there's some timing issues with this. So
I move to extend the meeting by another 5 minutes.
Okay. Everyone in favor?
Yes. Aye.
Nay.
Okay, we have.
Nay.
Okay, it was 3-2. 3-2. Okay, Rob.
Very quickly, there is Alpine School District is considering, as you probably have heard, potential doing a study on how to perhaps realign or redivide the district into different districts, or figuring out some method. We've heard that some cities might be interested in doing a similar thing. There's a very kind of close window of time, depending on how this moves forward, that either Alpine or cities may do it. I don't know what Highland wants to do. It's more of an informational thing of, if the cities do something, we may want to be interested in that and be aware of that. If Alpine's doing something, we'll probably want to participate in their meetings and give feedback and participate to give Highland's perspective on how they're going to do the redistricting. If anything does come up city-wise, it'll be done in the next council meeting or two at most. So,
Okay. There we are. Okay, we have, we do have a motion. We need to go into closed session for imminent litigation or property acquisition.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Doug, second by Ron. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are in closed session at this time. We can go back and we'll try to get done fast. Thank you for coming.